Okay, today is Tuesday, May the 1st, 2018. My name is Hillary Rink. I am here with Gregg Daugherty, and we are going to be doing an oral history about his life, both as a child and as an adult here in Atlanta. We are in the special collections at the Georgia State Library in Atlanta, Georgia. And we will be doing recording today, and depending on how far we get, we will probably be picking up with a second part at some later point. So first of all, Gregg, thanks for being here to do this. This helps add to the historical record, particularly sort of the more current history, particularly in the city of Atlanta, which as an LGBT person, you know, is not documented in a lot of the mainstream press. So the stories that people have and the artifacts they have are critical to helping younger generations learn about, you know, what was going on here in the fairly recent past. So thanks, first of all. Just a couple things. I am going to, you know, be sort of asking sort of, not a set series of questions, but sort of I have a guide, but we can go off on tangents.
Sure. If
I ever ask anything that you don't want to talk about, just say I'd rather not talk about that. There's no issue with that. I will obviously, my goal is to keep you engaged, and I'm
Sure.
looking at you, but don't be offended if I check my watch occasionally or
Sure.
if I'm making notes, because you may say something that triggers something that I want to pick up on later. So if you see me scribbling and stuff, I'm not being rude, I'm just trying to plan ahead for making sure I don't forget to circle back to a topic.
I understand.
So
I understand.
make
And first
sure
off,
that
I'm
you're
honored to be here, and thank you very much for including me.
Okay,
Very much.
good. Well, first of all, why don't, we'll just sort of do some background at the very beginning. First of all, can you just tell your full name, when you were born, where you were born, how old you are, and then just sort of to identify things, and then I'll start with some of the questions on your background and your family background.
My name is Gregg Daugherty. I was born in New Rochelle, New York. I am 64 years old. I came from New Rochelle to Black Mountain with my mother. My mother graduated from Columbia University. She was like the fourth Black woman to ever graduate from there. So she came home with her degree in me back to Black Mountain. And
for people who don't know, that's in North Carolina.
correct, Black Mountain, North Carolina, 15 miles to the east of Asheville. And
when were you born?
when was I born? I was March the 21st, 1954.
Gotcha.
So I just had my 64th birthday not a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's great. So obviously I want to start with some of your background, but to even take one step prior to that, a lot of times we like to learn a little bit more about your family background, any that you may know, because what we've discovered in some of these oral histories is that some of the sort of more tangential information has been useful for research and purposes other than LGBT. So we always like to ask people when they're here. So you talked about your mother and her being one of the first Black graduates at Columbia. Do you know, and if so, can you give us some background on sort of some of the history of your family, either on your mother's side or your father's side, if you know that, just to give us some context for you as a person?
I can do more of context as far as my mom's side of the family. My mother's family grew up, pretty much lived within an area where our ancestors, her family's ancestors, had worked as slaves. In a section, 1,200 acres, in a section, and on it, all of our neighbors were my relatives.
And where was this?
This was in Black Mountain.
Oh, okay.
Just outside the Blue Ridge YMCA Assembly, very large resort area. It's actually half a mountain. And very quiet, very peaceful, very beautiful, you know, bears in the garbage, deers in your yard, that whole routine. And the gentleman after the Civil War drove off in his buckboard, and they kept the property, and no one knew he had even left until about 1904. And on this property was, you know, my grandmother, so forth and so on. I grew up there. I am one of 32 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
And out of the 32 grandchildren, 6 of us, we have 6 lesbian, or I call them lesbiterians, and 4 gay gentlemen.
Interesting.
My cousins. These are my mother's 7 sisters and 3 brothers' children.
Right. So your grandmother grew up there in Black Mountain, and did your grandmother stay on what was the plantation?
They did. They all did.
And your mother grew up in
They assumed the property and I'm sorry. They assumed the property. Doyle Lytle, who owned the property and owned them, of the predecessors of, the great predecessors of, at the end of the war, 3 sons gone, wife done to a virus, so he just drove off and left them with the property. And so then over time, they just kind of kept, proceeding, moving things forward. No one knew he had even gone because they were the only ones that ever went into town to do any negotiating or doing or whatever, so who knew he wasn't there? He wasn't a social person.
Now, is there any family still on that property in Black Mountain?
A lot. Every house is still occupied.
Oh, wow.
All 8 houses are still occupied.
So then what?
It just changed around who was in them. Like some of my cousins grew up and have moved in and taken over the houses and with their families and whatever. And in 3 of the houses are my lesbian cousins and their partners.
Interesting.
And in one house, 4 children.
So, you mentioned that you grew up, and I know you came back to Black Mountain, but you were born in New Rochelle. What took your mother to New Rochelle, and when did she leave to go up to New York State?
My mother was in New York to go to Columbia University, and then when she graduated, she had was her and my dad and I and the whole
What year did she graduate from Columbia? Roughly?
She graduated. I always get that wrong. She graduated 2 years before I was born, so that's going to make it 52. Because we were there for 2 years. Because I had an aunt and uncle that lived there.
And what was her major?
Psychology.
Oh, wow. And how did she, having grown up in Black Mountain, North Carolina, sort of western North Carolina, even get Columbia in her head as a place that she might want to go? And how did she, do you know any information about, was it easy for her to get admitted or not? Or can you give any background on that?
One of the things, what got her in was her grades. And then the contributions that, the family kind of paid to help her get in the rest of the way. There were 3 members of my mom's siblings that went to college, all female. And it kind of was set up. I had an aunt, she's actually a great aunt. I had a great aunt and uncle that lived in New Rochelle. So my mom has a place to stay, my mom and dad had a place to stay. And so then the only thing that followed up with that is that she went up, did a little bit of kind of researching it, so forth and so on, and then just locked in and went for it.
Wow.
And she stayed, and she kind of went through it. She got a couple of awards for her grades and so forth. She did really well. She and my Aunt Sue, whom got a degree in medical degree in nursing, but they both really sort of just had great grades and just kind of breezed through. It's one of the things I have to say, even with my grandmother and some of my great aunts and a couple of my uncles, that was very significant in my mom's family was education, because we had quite a few that did professional jobs and so forth and so on.
Wow. So how long were you in New Rochelle after you were born?
3 years.
3 years.
3, yeah.
And what were your parents doing there for jobs?
Oh, well, my father worked for, it's a company called Carefont, and they basically
Sorry, say that again?
Carefont. Yeah.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, and he got a base with it in Swannanoa, North Carolina, which is another suburb of Asheville.
And what did the company do?
They help with trucking, actually, cargo was their thing, because it was truck to ship, so that kind of thing. And he did a lot of it, and he kind of actually got a little bit of extra training in New York, because when they moved back down to Black Mountain, and he went to work in Swannanoa.
And what was your mother doing in New Rochelle?
She was mostly going to class. Then when she did the work thing, what she did is she got a job with Carr and Merrill. Carr and Merrill were a psychotherapist. And she did 2 years of lab work with them. And just kind of,
As an undergraduate, or did she have a graduate degree?
she had a graduate's degree. And she went in and she did some work, and she did some work that then helped her go into what she did when she came home. Because when she came home, she went to work at the Western North Carolina Institute. And she went there, and it was a place where they did mental therapies and so forth.
And where is that located?
It is located in Asheville, and it's on the other side of Asheville.
So what prompted your parents to decide to move back to North Carolina as opposed to staying in New York?
They were always going to.
Oh, okay.
They were always going to, including the process that while they were about to come down, their house was being built. Because the house that I grew up in it was the land that my mother inherited, and it was just this, 5 acres. And
So how many acres total roughly is the whole property?
1,200.
1,200, wow.
And the area was called Lytle Cove, because there's this mountain and you come down, and there was this, and the big creek, and the pasture, and 1,200 acres. And the other side of it was the Monta Vista Horse Farms, which is one of the most popular, one of the oldest horse training farms in the United States. Yeah, a lot of the candidates for Kentucky Derby coming out of Florida would stay there en route to going to Kentucky.
So you moved back, you were 3 years old, you said, and tell me, you said you have brothers.
Mhm,
Where are
2.
you in the age order? Are you the
I'm oldest. I'm the oldest brother.
So
And then,
tell me, when your 2 brothers were born, like how much age difference?
my brother Steve is next to me, and he's 4 years younger than I am. And then my brother Brad is 7 years younger than I.
And they were born in Black Mountain?
They were born in Black Mountain. Mm-hmm. All there, yeah. There was no transition much from that.
Right. So did you and your brothers get along growing up?
Mm-hmm. Very much. Obviously, with the age difference with Brad, it was Steve and I kind of, with taking care of him and so forth and so on. But Steve and I were through a lot, and just really, really good as far as, and even still today. He had an incident with a wreck about 7 years ago, and so we've had to kind of deal with him getting back on mental footing. I mean, there was a period there where he would see me and not even remember my name.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but
Where do your brothers live now?
Steve is in Black Mountain, living in the house we grew up in. And my brother Brad, who was retired NBA All-Star, he was top draft choice to University of North Carolina in '86. He played for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was the first
Gregg Daugherty, he was there when I was there.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know. I
That's my
probably
baby
said hi
brother.
to him. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And he
Small world.
did he was the first African American to do NASCAR. He did Inside NASCAR on Showtime for a couple of years. He had a thing about Richard Petty, even as a kid. The posters on the wall and the whole thing and whatever. And so 43 was his number when he went into, when he was a junior, when he was JV basketball in high school, all the way through
Interesting.
retiring from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
And he lives where now?
He lives in Florida.
Florida. Oh, wow.
Yeah, Florida.
That's interesting.
My
You can
sister-in-law,
tell
my niece.
another UNC graduate interview.
Yeah, I didn't get that when you were telling me that it was UNC that you, yes.
That's funny.
Mm.
So do any memories particularly stand out just about your young years growing up with your brothers and your family there? Were your parents, I know when we first met, you said your mother moved down, and I assume your father did too. Did they remain married, or did they divorce or anything?
My parents were married.
Okay.
My parents were still married,
Oh,
just
good.
upstairs.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
So talk to me a little bit about, being a young boy there in Black Mountain and sort of, what it was like, how was school, where did you go to school, what did you like in school?
It was different because we're talking about, I was growing up in the 60s. So originally, Steve and I went to Carver Elementary, which was an all-black school in Black Mountain. And then the schools were integrated when I was going into the 8th grade. And I went to Black Mountain Elementary, that was my first class. Joan Brown was my first white teacher. And
Were you excited about that? Were you frightened?
Well, no, I was
going to a
excited
different
about the,
school?
well, I just was, I was very excited about the expanding and the possibilities of getting more and getting better, because this is what my parents and everyone was telling me, and especially my grandmother. My mother's mother speaks her mind, but her influence on me is dated. I mean, is amazing. I learned so much from my grandmother, so much. Everything from King's English to, regardless of how tall you are, how fat you are, whatever, your forehead should be behind your chin at all times, or don't walk with me. You can stand there and look stupid, or open your mouth and remove all doubt. Or, my grandmother.
And had she gone to college?
My grandmother did.
So was she self-taught, or?
No, she went to school. I mean, she graduated high school.
But I'm sure at the time, the schools that were available to her probably were not that rigorous, were they? I mean, do you think?
I don't know, because I wasn't there.
I was just curious, I'm just curious as to how much of this was her initiative to want to be this learned person.
She just, there was something about her and my sisters, her and my Aunt Tanny were just always very forward, very advanced. I'll just say this. My grandmother was the one that raised the money to help get my aunts into college. They had 2 chicken houses. One had chickens in it, but both of them needed corn. And the other one that didn't have the chickens was where they made moonshine. And these gentlemen on their, it was very interesting because they would sort of work with these young guys, these young white gentlemen from Tennessee that would take this back and forth and whatever. So I learned, in getting that, once I got the story of that, it was just like, there's nothing else about this woman that's going to ever surprise me. Because her motivations to put that together, to create it, to do what we have to do to get it done, to do collaborations with whatever we have to do to get it expedited, yada, 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 to make it happen, because my children need to go to college. The one thing that was very, very different growing up in Black Mountain from pretty much anywhere else was this thing, regardless of the color of your skin, and we had 3 colors because there were lots of Cherokee Indians in my region. It just didn't make any difference. Even when I was going to Carver, the all-black school, I still played with the Holcombs, who lived around on the horse side of the Cove Mountain, and the Antoni family. They were Cherokee.
So you had American Indian and white friends even when you were going to the segregated school?
Yeah, we would get on our bicycles and would do the thing, and my mother would do okay, they're coming over here. Okay, you all have to go there. Sue and Connie are coming down, they're the Ontalis. And that was it.
So obviously that's a very positive experience. Do you have any memories around that time when you were that age and young of any negative experiences, or being in town, or having any unpleasant experiences with white people?
There's one that really sticks, and it's interesting you mentioned it, because we were just last year get together, it was Thanksgiving, and I went to Brad's, and we were talking and telling stories, and I remembered that experience. I was very young. We didn't have Brad. I probably was, I don't know, 5 or 6, very young, but young enough to remember it. And we were at a gas station, and the man's gassing up, and his wife's gone in to get something, and one of the kids is out, and he just goes, "Oh, look, Daddy, look at the niggers." And his father, "Oh," whatever like that, and puts him in the car, and whatever, yada, yada, yada. And then we just get in, and my mom is like, "Just chill, no reaction, just have a seat, whatever." And just about as we had finished paying and were pulling off, the guy waved, and the woman got out of the car, came over and said, "I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Y'all have a good day." And that was all she said.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But it was just, but you had stupid. I think one of the things also with this that I was going to say earlier is that, did I mention I was one of 32 grandchildren? Okay. So I don't need to make that some kind of whatever, but reality is reality.
Right.
That was the same thing even in school. If there were incidents, and of course they're gonna happen. And of course it was my sister, my girl cousins, but just, you know, if you have to stand up and defend yourself and take whatever you've got to do, then you just do it, you know.
Did you, like, during your childhood when it was still segregated, and if you were out in town and, I don't know, if there were white and colored entrances or white and colored bathrooms, did that ever stick in your mind, or did you ever ask your mom or dad, like, why is it, or
A lot of times
what's going on?
a lot of times you didn't even have to ask because the information's coming at you before you even got it. The colored thing, we didn't have it in Black Mountain. And we didn't have it in, but the only place I remembered seeing that was in Asheville. But we didn't have it in Black Mountain nor in Monterey, because you know, those two are right beside each other. And
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know if I ever questioned it and got an answer, or if the answer just came. It's now that we're doing this, I have to be honest with you. Having such a large family, the information resource highway, oof, you know, it was a lot, because there's always something, you know, whatever. And I can remember so many of the times when we the younger ones, had to go away and let the older chat, you know, so that you could, you know, kind of figure. And then that way, but then my aunts and my uncles and my whatever, they would get on one agreement, okay, this is what we're going to tell them, right? Okay, stick to the script. You know, that kind of thing. And so a lot of stuff was just that way.
Yeah. Let me ask, I know in the early part of the 20th century, there was the sort of very progressive movement up in Black Mountain College, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I know it closed, but do you think that history of that region had any impact on maybe how the racial thing was dealt with there?
Huge. That camp, because it became a Camp Rockmont. I was actually a counselor there. I was actually one of the first Black counselors there too.
Okay.
And that, it was a nudist hoo-ha for a while, and then it was the art college, and it was around a lake, and its influence on the area, I think the seed was there, and just as we were discussing earlier about just how it exploded, because now that whole area is just galleries and places where you can go and learn different things. Like they've got this major thing where you can go and learn pottery,
right,
where you can learn to paint, along with exhibits. I think that fitting into the culture was a huge thing. One of the things that was very significant about, and even when I went to college and actually changed my degree. I went to college with a biology degree, and changed it to art education. But one of the things that was very much in the environment there, and of course now is over the top, was art. A lot of people coming there, a lot of writers coming there to be in those camps and write a book or a movie, so forth and so on.
Right. In school, as a young person in elementary school and junior high, what were your interests? What were your favorite subjects? What'd you like to do?
Yeah, I loved reading a lot, and I loved being able to. I don't know what there was a big thing about that. I liked discussing things because I liked information. The art, the science thing has always been up with me. I had my first garden when I was 8 years old. By my mother's.
Flower or vegetable?
Yes.
Both.
See, both of the above. And it was right by the clothesline. And because my mom, when she would do her little gardening, whatever, which was, I used to tell her later after college or whatever, I said, I believe your garden was more therapy than after whatever. She said, you caught on to that, eh? And so is mine today. I mean, I have 2 ponds, whatever, and all this and stuff. And it's my therapy. I learned a long time ago, you can be stuck with something and get up and walk around and go out there and go, aha. But the biggie with things with school and things that I was interested in, the whole thing with the science was biggie. And this lady, her name was Eleanor Berry, Dr. Eleanor Berry. And she worked with the Smithsonian, and she took me in. Again, I'm the only one with a tan in the group. And she took me in, and we were going around, and we were going and collecting salamanders, crayfish, so forth and so on, and putting them in formaldehyde, hoo-ha, with the names on them, and sending them to the Smithsonian for the collection of things there. And I found 9 crayfish that had not been discovered, and they went to the Smithsonian, and they're Gregg Daugherty eye. And that was when I was a sophomore in high school.
Now, how did you connect with the lady from the Smithsonian?
With Dr. Berry. She knew through one of my great aunts. So my great aunt was her maid. My great aunt wasn't her maid. It was through her maid knowing my great aunt and church.
Wow.
Thomas Chapel AME Zion Church, which is where we went to. And they, through that, she just, and the woman, the maid said, well, you know, so-and-so's nephew, whatever, is really, he's got such a good whatever. And so one day going over to the lake, which is once again on the Blue Ridge Assembly property, but we would cut through and go over to her house. And my mother decided we needed to walk the dogs. And I thought, this is an awful long walking of the dogs. And we went over, and so Miss Berry could meet me.
Oh, wow.
And we sat and chatted. I remember we sat and chatted, and I had a Dr. Pepper. And it was the first time I'd ever drank a Dr. Pepper.
Wow.
And it was probably the last.
So what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were in that age?
That age, I wanted to be a scientist. I really had visions of, Cousteau's right hand, whatever, all of that. I remembered I had a book of one of his predecessors, and I had books on fish and whatever, and I still have that obsession to this day.
So stuff related to the oceans?
Stuff related to, well, it was a mix. You see, that was just one phase. So that's my big interest in the fish, the nature, wild, life in the water. But I also, birds, we had suet sticks and whatever, and from our house, the back of our house, the bay window, and off the dining room, you lift it up, and then there's the books with all the birds in it. And my mom would give us, you get points if you could name the more birds that would come to the feeders, especially in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just all of that kind of encouragement. And so I just always was a nut for nature. And like I said, I had a garden at 8.
Did you have a sense then among your friends that your mom and your aunt and your grandmother and your family in general appeared to be very into knowledge and books and all that? Were your friends' families like that, or did you get a sense that your family was a little different?
Yeah, I had a cousin Calvin say once that he wished that his mom had more of an interest in things that were important and educational. Because he goes, my mom just says, just do whatever you gotta to get by. And he says, and well, he was a cousin, and he said, so he goes, but Miss Dorothy would not let you do that. Y'all do that, do that. I said, well, and I remember telling him, it wasn't like I was tortured or anything to do it. I'm interested. She's just dangling a carrot. I'm into it. And so was my brother Steve. My brother Steve he's ready. I remember, bothers me sometimes. He would have such an interest in things. The questions. He's just got the questions. And when we were young, I used to think, dude, reel it in. What a pain you are. And now I realize that's genuine. That's wonderful. To have that, to be inquisitive, to want to know. Because you get an answer, but he's got another question for you. And it never stops, and it never stops. He was a counselor for a juvenile counselor. He graduated from Berea College and went and did that. And then it was 2001, in June of 2001, and he was in Durham, and a Cisco food truck ran the light, crushed him in the car, had the jaws of life him out. He flatlined on us for 17 seconds, which I then learned is when you have brain damage, because when you flatline, your brain cells pop and they don't grow back. So, but he's fine, and he's fine, he's wonderful, he's fabulous. On the 7th of May, he will have a birthday.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. So, did you, in your time as a young person there, did you ever get classmates sort of picking on you as sort of a nerd?
Constantly.
You know, like, oh,
Constantly.
you're
Constantly.
not. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, and that whole thing within the classroom, so there'd be a question or something's going on or whatever, and they go, well, Greg will answer it, or, whatever, or just, stupid things. I can't remember the number of times there was during taking tests or things like that or whatever, and, either people helped me with the question or literally just looking on my, paperwork or whatever and all like that. And, my grades were okay, but, I wasn't blowing anything out of the water, and I did okay.
Did you enjoy school? I mean, you obviously enjoyed the learning. Did you enjoy the experience of school? Did you have friends, a lot of friends?
I had a lot of friends. I played ball for most of school.
What kind?
Basketball.
Basketball.
I'm 6'9".
Right.
Yeah.
No, I have met tall
Ping
people
pong's not gonna
who
be
did
penciled
not like
in.
basketball.
Well, yeah, you have to like it. You have to care about it. For me, it was a really good thing because it was a great way to meet, to do the mixing thing, especially with the fact that in the 8th grade was when the schools became integrated. And so then I was only in elementary school for 1 year. The next year, I went to high school because our high school was 9 through 12. So, in the second year of my integrated school situation, JV basketball.
Right.
And so we just kind of took off with that. And it was once again, was the numbers, of the friends and the relatives that then mixed in with some new and some not so new guys. And, of course it was all boys.
What surprised you after integration, both in a good way and a bad way, with respect to your school experience?
The good way was the education level, the things we were getting in what we were learning and whatever was significantly better. And then, and also meeting people, that's a great thing. More, community interaction all around. It's like, well, the wall is down now.
Mm-hmm.
Negative would be mentally deprived individuals that you have to interact with and be around, bigots, ignorant. The school system had some flaws, but our principal, I'm going to go high school because the elementary school was kind of stupid, even with my mother almost having to physically come into a whatever with my 8th grade teacher because she spanked me. And my mother told them, principal and all, when we went to the schools, do not spank them. If you have a disciplinary problem, call me. And you just need me on the phone. You don't need me to come over there. Just
what was the disciplinary problem that got you to
passing of a note that was given to me to go this way. I'm participating, and I just passed the note on, and all 3 of us went out and whatever, and she decided to give me 5 swacks on the butt, and then I went to the office, and everybody went to the office and called our parents, and I got my mother, and she goes, all right, well, like I said, oh, and Mom, she spanked me. She went, she what? And my mother said, I'll be right there. She came over, the next thing I know, my mom's at the door with the principal asking her to wait. My mother just opened the door, looked at Joan Brown and went, may I? And she came out, and then my mother intentionally opened the door back up so she could hear. And my mother it was expletive after expletive, and pretty much had her against the wall.
And how did the teacher react?
She just got up against the wall, very, very afraid because my mother put her finger right on her nose. And after that, she came in, and I left. Because my mother looked at me and went, let's go. And I left, and so I don't know. I do know when I was leaving that my teacher was teary-eyed.
Were most of the teachers and the administration in your high school supportive of integration? Did you feel supported?
Yeah, there was a couple that kind of went beyond. There was a couple. Dr. Sapp was extraordinarily, he would go out of his way. And he would go out of his way in class and he was history. And he would go out of his way in class to include things from black culture. I mean, it was amazing. And even with some students then telling their parents and the parents having a problem with it, and he would just kind of go, I'm gonna put it on the quiz, and it will determine whether you go to the next grade, and I'm not gonna undo it because your mother doesn't like it. So,
Wow.
your call.
Wow. Before we sort of get out of your high school and
Sure.
start thinking about older, I want to actually jump back just a little bit. When did you, let me ask you a question, this may or may not be relevant at this time point. When did you first realize that you might be gay or that you might be different? Was it as a child, as an adult?
It was early high school.
Okay.
I knew when I was young. I knew when I was very young. Like,
In what way did you know?
I knew because I'd already kind of, I could hear my mom and dad talking and things because of having so many gay people in my family. And we did not really talk about it, but.
Meeting the family?
Yeah, you didn't really talk about it, but when my dad and I had the conversation was when I was like a sophomore, junior in high school. And the conversation was then because he then was doing this thing and it was coaching me on what to do as far as interacting with girls. And he just point blank asked me, do you know, are you picking up, I had a good buddy, Mike Franklin, and he was dating everybody and whatever because he was hot. And my father was like, so are you kind of picking up some things from him? Did you get the gist of, are you gonna whatever? Greg, we got a prom coming up. What's going on? And I was like, I'm taking Linda. And I thought he was gonna like pass out. But so then there came this thing of just any questions that you might want to have, let's just be open with it. But I knew right about when I went to high school that I was, and it wasn't just any light little thing, I was gay, and that my attraction was, towards men.
And did you know what gay, did you use that word gay, or what did you, how did you
No, we didn't have gay then. It was homosexual, and then, what was that word my grandmother used to use, and it was, I can't do it, I can't even think of that word, but it had something to do with other.
So when your dad asked that, do you have anything you want to talk about? Did you raise it then? Did you and your father talk about it at that point or not?
All I did was confirm. Yes, the answer was to be a yes, no.
And what was the question?
The question was, do you realize, do you understand your sexuality? Do you know which side of the fence was the term that they kind of used, that you're on? And do you know? And I went, yes, I do. And he goes, okay.
Did he ask which side?
Yeah. And I said, my cousin Michael. I said, like Michael. And he goes, okay.
Did your brothers know about your sexuality as you guys were growing up?
Mm-hmm.
And were they supportive?
Brad didn't. Steve did. But Brad was kind of far apart from us. Brad didn't. And
again, he's 8 years younger than you, is that what you said?
yeah, right. It was in between 7 and 8. We always say 7. I'm 7 years older than him. But he didn't for a long time. So, long time. The time I graduated high school, he did. Yeah.
And your brothers were supportive? Did they ever
Yeah,
get in
but
trouble?
you never, no, just,
That's good.
well, once again, you're
Right.
getting this doctrination by your parents telling you, this is the way it's gonna be, this is how you're going to react to it, and that kind of thing, and so forth and so on, and this is your family.
What about your friends in high school? Did they know?
No, we didn't talk about it.
Do you think they knew that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the only one that many, many years later, like after college, that I ran into was Michael and Quentin. This guy Quentin, whom I played ball with in high school, and he was really good. And they knew, because I moved to Atlanta, and I went back and moved to Atlanta. He goes, "Wow, it's just a gay thing down there. It's off the leash." And I went, "Yeah."
And again, what was the name of your high school?
The high school was Charles D. Owen. Charles D. Owen High School, the War Horses.
Oh, wow.
I was also a drum major. I was in the band and played trumpet, and which I thank my mother for that. She put up with me learning to play a trumpet. And then my senior year, I decided I'd like to be drum major because Kathy Ivy, who had been the drum majorette all that time, and we'd only had girls, was graduating, and she was a big buddy and just really good, you know. And so she said, you know, you ought to do it. And then my band, Mickey Garrison, and he had come from Mars Hill and kind of decided to become our high school band director. And he just brought this new energy. I mean, he just brought all this. We changed our music. We changed, you know, I'll never forget, we changed, and one of the first songs was Chicago. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, was the first song. And we're just like, wow. And of course, back then, you know the music in
right.
high school bands, it would just be all this whatever. But that was the genre that he brought.
Right.
You know,
He brought in rock.
hip, rock, we're gonna do this now, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, okay. And we were good at it. And we just really kind of did. But anyway, and this, one of the photos I actually found last week that I'm going to be giving to, it's out of a newspaper clipping, and it's us in the Asheville Christmas Day Parade. And it's me, Mark, here's the majorettes, and you have the white hat, whatever, you can see it's me, and then the band.
With your height, particularly.
That was one of his other things. He goes, "Be perfect." He says, "Everybody can see you." He goes, "Whatever." He goes, "I direct. You just perform to the rhythm. That's all you got to do. You don't have to go and learn to become a whatever." So yeah, so
That's
that
great.
was, yeah, it was really good.
Good. I want to touch on one totally unrelated topic before we leave high school. Given that you were born in 54 and were coming of age as a young person and a young teenager in the mid to late 60s, how aware of you of all of this stuff going on vis-a-vis the civil rights movement, and were you and your family engaged? Did you talk a lot about, you know, SCLC or Martin Luther King or the things that were going on? I'm just curious as to how much what was happening in the bigger world was sort of in your mind as a teenager.
A lot, and it was a lot of questions, you know, all those evenings sitting in the den in front of the black and white RCA TV, watching all these things, you have all these questions, and my parents just kind of explaining, or in a lot of cases, they would let us watch it and then respond to us. And I learned much later from my mother, when I was getting ready to start teaching, you know, she goes, "You realize that's what you should do, is that's how you teach." She says, "It's not so much you running your mouth as much as responding to this information that they are absorbing." And that's what my parents did with us, because they would tell us a lot of stuff in this. It said Martin Luther King and the whole thing, and I remember the whole Montgomery thing was just really, it had a dramatic effect on me.
Which thing?
The march in Montgomery where they went over the bridge and they'd have the water hosing
Right,
thing and the
right.
police beat
Because
up
I was
those
thinking
people.
the bus boycott, we were too young.
No, they it was just really a lot. But the violence level in it was very educational, because it made me realize that, you know, just that there's a world out there that's.
And how did you process that? Process that and seeing all those violent images, given that within Black Mountain you said, you know, you were playing with white kids and it was just, it seemed like a different world.
It was a different world. And I mean, you still had bigots there, it was interesting, we always had a comment about the fact, whenever you kind of ran into somebody that was a bigot, you'd probably, he's probably from Swananoa or Asheville. Which
Say that
is,
again?
it's probably from Swananoa,
Swannanoa.
Asheville, the town of, which is
Right,
like right beside us.
Right.
But it's just different. And
Do you remember?
painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
I'm sure.
That's just
Do you remember the whole? You would have been what, 13 or 14 when Martin Luther King was assassinated. How
Mhm.
did that get processed within your family?
I remember that. I don't think I was 13. I had left Carver when he was assassinated.
It was 68. Is when he.
Was it? Okay. I remembered that I was at Carver because I remembered the crying. I remember the whole school doing the crying thing. And because this friend of mine kind of faking it. That was the strangest thing. He'd cry and they'd look around and see if everybody's still crying. Okay, I guess I'm still crying. But
Did the
It was
teacher announce it, or how did you do? No, because
it came over the
did it happen during
loudspeaker.
the school day?
Yes, it came over the loudspeaker, and the principal announced it over the speaker that he had been killed. And I remembered not really knowing how to react to this. I got it.
And you were still in a segregated school.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And I got it. Was that 68? Oh, I couldn't have been in the war. That couldn't have been possible. Anyway, maybe it was something else. That had to be it though. I'm sorry. I'm just not processing it. But I remember distinctly being in the school. It was in Carver. And just we would, and it was a shock. But
What did your parents say about it?
My mother really had a problem with it. But the only thing was, my grandmother came to eat with us, and I guess it was that evening or the next day, but it was soon therein, the healing process hadn't quite taken effect. And my grandmother was there, and I remember my grandmother, in all of her bluntness, just basically saying that he was blessed to have lived this long, period. Because he knew. And then that whole thing where he did I've been to the mountaintop, and I may not be here with you, whatever, and all of that. And I'll never be sitting there, I'm getting goosebumps now, and just kind of going, the whole thing. And that was probably one of my first, and I say one of because it wasn't the only one, but one of my first sort of kismet lessons. And I've had many of them.
And why do you say that?
I believe that some things are planned. I believe that some things are sort of just in the nature of flow, that we have no control over. This is this thing and it's going to happen, and it's just kismet. Running into someone that knows you inside out and whatever, sort of like Morna, whom I met and went, were you in, okay.
Maybe a different life.
Yeah, pretty much. And I have a lot of very strong interest in Asian things and philosophies and movements.
I'm just curious, again, that triggered one question. Given sort of the I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, the different perspectives within the civil rights movement during the mid-60s. Obviously, Martin Luther King was important to your family. Did your parents or your family ever talk about sort of the other side of that, the Malcolm X side? That part didn't get discussed, the more militant side.
Yeah.
And how was that discussed within your family?
Bad, 5 more times bad. That it's just a violent reaction. He's not taking it the way, it was very anti-Muslim. And there was this tone in my family about it, even with conversations later, like in college, where I'd go, well, you know, the Black Panthers have their whatever, and she goes, well, they're just being bad, but they're not, you know, so that's not so much a Muslim thing. It was a very negative thing about the whole Muslim thing, and I remembered meeting this guy, and he had something to do with like a Lowe's or something store, you know, which was around back then. But back Lowe's helped build our house. But this man, and he was Muslim, and he, you know, looked openly about it, yada yada yada, whatever like that.
And he was a black
Muslim,
militant, okay.
black Muslim. Don't know about the militant part, but he was black. You know, he was black and Muslim. You know, you can be black and Muslim and not have to be a militant.
Right, exactly.
That's a choice.
Exactly.
So, but he was Muslim, and just, you know, the information from my family was just negative, 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 negative. Satan's puppet was a term. My daddy came out of my father's mouth, and I never forgot that. He was Satan's puppet.
Was he specifically referring to Malcolm X?
He was referring to this gentleman.
Oh, this gentleman, okay.
Yes. And so we were just talking very negative things. I had to kind of make my own decisions about it. But even with, I have to say, even Denzel Washington doing the movie, and my reaction to it, you know, what, 10 years ago, whatever like this, I mean, as an adult, was not positive. And to the point that I laughed about it, and I do now, about just like, boy, that seed is planted, isn't it? And there is nothing to do about that. Even though as you get older, you realize you need to take control of your own life, you know.
So you got through high school. Your senior year, where were you thinking you might want to go to college? Talk to me about how you decided where you wanted to apply, where you wound up.
Basketball, and what would be the strongest avenue for me to get a good education to do some other things. I got a scholarship I went initially to the University of Tennessee. Didn't stay, I stayed there a year. Then went to Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina. Sorry. And loved it. And then
so you got a scholarship to there.
Uh-huh,
Is
played
that what
basketball.
made the decision, or did you want to go there anyway?
Well, I knew several folks that had gone there, and or had friends or whatever. No, actually, several that were ahead of me in school, high school, that went there. The big thing was the fact the scholarship was just over the top. I mean, it was just bells, whistles, everything paid, just show up, whatever, here's your room, whatever, this, you know, nothing. And I was...
So you were there 3 years?
Mm-hmm. I was tall for my age then, but, and of course that would have made me a center, being under the basket, but I could shoot, and that's rare for a center. I get out in the corner and just sit and go, okay. And the scouts just went berserk over it, because instead of wanting me to be under that basket pulling the ball down, which of course I could do, I could shoot. You know, mostly that's a guard's job. So I had lots of choices. I went and visited, I almost went to Middle Tennessee State University, which is in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Almost went there. And to be honest with you, what turned me off from going there was when I got there, the scout coaches, people, whatever, around this party, whatever, were trying to get me laid with these girls. They introduced me to 4 different women. This one girl, we were out with a group of the guys that are being, you know, there's like 20 of us. And we went to this bar, and this girl, you know, in my lap, off comes the top, the whole bit like that. I just kind of went along with it. And then she got up and whatever, and they kind of kept doing this thing. There was that, and they waved a joint in my face, you know, just the whole thing. And I just sort of, so that evening, my mom called and goes, so, what's the deal? And I went, well, it's pretty over the top, a lot. And she goes, and she knew, I don't know, she just would be very direct with me. And she very openly and directly said, have they been trying to dazzle things in front of you that maybe aren't on your list? And I went, a lot. And she went, okay, you want to come home? And I went, I'm fine. I have to leave tomorrow anyway. So
And what year did you graduate high school again?
I graduated in 72.
Two, okay, so this would have been, okay.
Mhm.
So then you went to Western Carolina, and did you, like, roommates and stuff, were the people you knew, or did you meet new people to
No.
room with? or-
Well, oh, wow. Ooh, that's a lot. Because it changed a bunch. We had a thing in our family that, not my the whole family, the whole
Not your immediate.
Lyle Keeter Daugherty. We call it the Lyle family because that's the overbranch that we all come down from. You can come out when you leave.
Oh.
You are not gay until you leave. When you leave, Mardi Gras, rock and roll. Until then, you are my son. Capiche? Got it. So, when I left, I'm playing basketball. I stayed in the sports dorm, you know, and my roommate was also on the team with me. And I did that for a year. And then I met, then when I went to Western. And I went to Western and I met Danny Holloman, big tall redhead from Raleigh, North Carolina. And he was a friend, a buddy, and later on moved here. And
Was he on the basketball team too?
no,
Okay.
no, he was there just as a student, and he was in the drama department. He brought me out.
Why do you say that? What did he do?
Took me to the drama department, introduced me to other gay men, taught me about drag, bars, things. He brought me out, as in every sense of the term, brought me out. Just was an incredible friend. And I met several folks, Stan Poole, Randall Willis, who have publications in here, right here. Danny's picture is in, I got him to pose for a couple of cruise magazines. They did a Pulse piece for The Boy Next Door to promote their clothing. He's the model.
You'll have to show me pictures later.
Yeah, he's hot. And as a matter of fact, he was always telling me, "You're great for helping me get dates." And I went, so, because I go, "Get up and dance with me." Okay, now get on this side.
So did you meet him your first year at Western?
Yeah, I met him within, we always joked about that, because I laughed with him. I said, so I think I was here for like 48 hours. And
How did you meet?
Because I decided that I needed to kind of the drama department. And literally, I was coming out of the post office in Cullowhee, right on the whatever like that. And he comes up and goes, so you're one of the new ball players. And I said, yeah, whatever. And he just introduced himself, yada, yada, yada. And just moved on. And then I moved out of the dorm and moved into this house that this friend of mine from Black Mountain's parents rented. And we had 4 roommates, and we paid our rent by boarding girls' horses from the college.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how was it on campus to be both sort of known as a person interested in drama and a basketball player? Did anyone ever bring that up, that this is sort of an interesting combination of interests? Or was it
No, because the drama thing was a sub thing. Because when I went there, I was a science major. Because I went in, I was going for a degree, you know,
Right.
yeah, in biology. But I was taking art classes all along. Because my grades were very, very high in art. But my art history, you know, all of that, 3D design. Which, as a matter of fact, we're going to be talking about Ray Lindsay later on, because he really helped me. He helped me. He then left Western and went to become the superintendent of schools in Wake County, which is where I went to become a teacher.
So how long were you there at Western before you decided that you didn't want to major in science?
Oh, it was in my junior year. It was in my junior year. And I'd been taking the art courses all along, like I said. I just decided I needed to shift that. And it also had now become very aware that I am not going to be a professional basketball player, and you just need to go ahead and say it, Greg.
And did
I had
you
never
want to be?
No, But I just went along with it. Even when I graduated high school, it was like, oh, you're going to be a great pro star. And I went, yeah, no, thanks. And I played, and everything was fine. I just didn't, I didn't mind the shift. And so, and the other thing, you know, was, I told my mom and dad. My dad said, well, still got bills to pay. And I went,
You told them what, you didn't want to be a ball player?
I did not want to be a ball player. This was going into my junior year.
And were you good enough to be recruited, or did you?
I'd already had 3 conversations.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so you did. So it wasn't. Oh, I'm not good at this. Oh, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And the biggest, one of the other things was, and I don't know why we considered it a gift, but was my knee. My knee just kept tearing up, and it's affected me forever, even into softball. But my knee just made it so that I would not be a candidate for. And I'll never forget my Aunt Barbara kissing my knee. Congratulations. This is where we're going to my graduation.
And how are your parents when you said I'm going to move from science into a more arts focused?
My mother did not like it. She was disappointed. She was very disappointed. She said she was really looking forward to, you know, the possibilities of, you know, Doctor whatever, Gregg, whatever. She says, you teach. She said, I just saw you out in the jungle with the monkeys collecting whatever it is they want you, you know. She says, I just see you with that. Just like I used to see you out in these woods here running around doing whatever and collecting and stuff. And she says, it's your choice. She says, but I'm disappointed.
What about your father?
The fact that I was in college and the fact that I was pushing forward, that was all he wanted.
I guess maybe the other question, what about your grandmother? How engaged was your grandmother with you during your time in college?
Her Royal Highness. Yeah, Her Supreme Majesty at this point pretty much was told me whatever I wanted to do, because she never felt anything negative with anything I was doing. She saw what I was doing. When I decided to change it, she pretty much told me, she says, well, you'll be great at that. She says, you can do either one. You'll nail it. I know you will. She said, you know, and she really stood up for me at that point and literally put the extra log on my fire for me to do what I wanted to do. And because my mother was giving me so much flack that I was thinking of not doing it.
And do you think that she had some discussions with your mom?
The pot was on the porch. We had a thing whenever this pot was sitting on the porch, you don't come in. Because my parents had a rule about not arguing in front of us. Or if they had something, and like if my grandmother would come over, or my mom would come over and that pot went on the porch, you knew that there was something going on inside. Many years later, I used to joke about the fact that that pot on the porch is probably the reason we got Brad. But anyway, I'll leave that alone. Just saying. But, you know, biology major and all. So, but no, yeah, I'm sure they did. They sure did. I got the hint they did once when we were having Christmas soiree at my aunt's Tanny's.
Wow. So, given that you graduated high school in '72, you were at Western Carolina in the mid-'70s, obviously Stonewall had happened in '69.
Mm-hmm.
There was starting to be some awareness in the general press about gay liberation and all that stuff. Did any of that percolate down to Cullowhee, North Carolina?
Yeah.
Did that become a topic of interest, conversation? Talk to me a little bit about how awareness of what was going on in the broader gay world was processed by you guys there.
That's why I really got motivated to be around the art department, because one of the things that really, there was some clubs, meeting, you know, groups, whatever, and in those...
You mean like clubs at the school, not
gay
nightclubs?
No, I'm talking about organizations,
okay.
Groups, gay groups that would meet.
And were they sort of under the radar, or were these official school groups?
No, they were not official school groups, but they were in official school facilities or at the dean of the art department's home, which was fabulous.
And were these did students form these on their own? Okay.
No. I think it was a collaboration between him and them, because always when we would be there, there would be the professors or someone from, whatever. I remember this guy came, and he was from Atlanta, and I can never remember the name. And he spoke, and he had the Great Speckled Bird.
Yeah, that was the
magazine.
the
Hippie-
alternative newspaper.
Yeah. I remember the guy that used to hand it out at 10th and Peachtree, for more than one reason. But he was there, and he had something to do with the Great Speckled Bird. And he came, and he was at this meeting, and he was talking and chatting. It was the first time I'd seen a publication that had, that was just gay, friendly-ish, whatever. And I remembered him talking to me and to us about things and whatever. And I guess, I keep talking about this planting of the seed. He probably planted the seed for me being here, because it was one of the things that helped me get my attention towards where am I gonna go? And while Atlanta, always was that place. And he, but it was a lot of good information and a lot of great things. And mostly what we got from him, I remember getting from him, and there was a large group of us. I mean, there was easily 60-ish, guys there. Not a girl, not a single girl. But was about, where we could go to get things. You could mail, write a letter to these people, whatever. Obviously, we couldn't do online or whatever. So we had to send the pigeon. But, to get information.
And did the club have a name?
The meeting thing that they had,
Organization.
Bodine. And Bodine, and that was, we're gonna have a thing at Bodine, and that was, I always get it, McMurray with no A was his name.
Do you know where the name Bodine came from?
Dean McMurray, the art department dean.
But I wonder why he
The dean part?
made Bodine.
The Bo thing had something to do with Louisiana.
Well, you do know at some point, obviously 10 years at least
Sure.
later,
Sure.
Bodine is mentioned
Sure.
in a B-52 song.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't know. The only thing I can tell you, it has something to do with Louisiana.
And so, and tell me again the art department professor's name that sort of instigated a lot of this.
Oh, they hooked up the whole thing. Chris McMurray.
Chris McMurray.
And he and Ray Minzy were very influential.
So you said they were all men that came to this. Were you aware of lesbians on campus, and they just kept separate, or?
They didn't. They came to a couple of things. I remembered when the most I got any interaction would be, I can think it was, you have to remember the drama department was very gay. Even the straight guys that were there, were totally open and fine and whatever.
It was the 70s.
Just nobody cared. Really? What? And who cared? Just they really didn't. The casualness of it really blew me away. But it was one of the things also about Western that I have to just put it out there was Western was a hippie heaven. And heaven and then haven. And so this whole open-minded, just kind of whatever thing was, very there on scale. It was one of the few places I've ever known where straight guys were quite interested in maybe having a date with you, and just, but it was really, it was a blessing. Once again, one of the most wonderful things that I could have ever have done was to go there, that choice.
Was the campus fairly gay accepting? I mean, I know people probably couldn't be out the way we would think of it today, but was the general vibe on campus sort of cool, given that it was a city haven?
It was. There was this guy that was in one of my history classes, and he would come and he would paint makeup. Paint his face. He would do the rosy whatever.
And come to history class?
Yeah, he was in class. He had his eyebrows all plucked and whatever. But just the rest of him's a guy. And once someone made a comment once, I can't do the professor's name, but I see him now, simply saying, let's just have one very clear understanding This is a classroom of mixed individuals, just as the world is outside out there. And if you're not able to accept that, then possibly you need to go and join that world out there.
Wow.
Got it? Not everybody says capiche, I say capiche, but they got it. So, but this was very different. But it was an amazing school.
Do you think you had a sense of it at the time as a young person that you were sort of in a sort of really cool environment for college?
Before I even moved my stuff there, when we went to check it out, with my mom and dad, and one of my Uncle John went, and just to check it out, and this is where Gregg was going to go to school, and so we went to check it out and whatever, and I was just like, this is wild, because we pulled in and we parked and we were sitting and waiting for Coach Hartberger to come out and all this kind of stuff, and there's this, the student center thing and the big lawn in front, and there are these, remember this is the hippie hoo-has, so there are these guys out there playing their guitars and hanging out, and I just went, oh yeah.
Now, during your college time, did you have a lot of communication or interact a lot with any of your high school friends to get a sense of their college experience and if it was different than yours?
There was, I guess about 5 that were with me that came to Western.
Okay.
Yeah, one guy and the rest were girls. As a matter of fact, Daphne, I found one of her pictures. Gorgeous girl. She was actually a homecoming queen, and we were really good buddies. We were really tight, and I knew she knew I was gay because many years later she told me, because I was like, "So you know I'm," and she went, "Please, pause." Save it.
So were you officially out to anyone during college?
I wasn't out to everyone. It's not everyone's
To anyone?
business.
I mean, did you ever say to someone, I'm gay?
Well, like I said, Danny Holloman brought me
Right.
out. So I then proceeded to just, hi, how are you? And Stanley and Randall and Michael Dunn. We were gay. And I actually left the farmhouse. Was at the farmhouse for a while, and then I left the farmhouse and got an apartment.
And what was gay life in Cullowhee like, other than that club that you guys had? Were there bars? Were there social dances?
There were some, but these would be like at people's homes, and especially when you had a situation where someone wasn't in a dorm and had a home, and they were renting a house.
Right.
Because we're out in the woods. We are way out in the woods, right on the Cullowhee, the Chattahoochee, not Chattahoochee, what do they call it? Is it the Cullowhee River? What is that river? I can't remember.
I should know. I'm in Carolina.
I know, well, and.
It's very western North Carolina.
Right.
Very, very
Well, the
west.
river that was in Deliverance, because they filmed Deliverance, a big section of Deliverance out there. Just the hippie thing was dominant.
So would you consider yourself a hippie during that time?
Absolutely, oh, absolutely. I had the fro. My mother had a thing. You could do the fro, you could do the bell bottoms, but if I ever see that comb, stick it in your hair, party over. Yes, ma'am. That comb. And I never did that. The Afro pink comb with the fist on it.
Didn't JJ do that on Good Times?
And my mother would just, I think that was actually one of the times we were watching TV, and she went, And I never did it. And actually, she kind of explained why. She says, it's tacky. She says, don't you want to be attractive and whatever, even if this is something that your father and I are going to have to get used to, but wouldn't you prefer to be, I know, yes, ma'am. And she goes, okay, then let's do that.
So then is there, before we go on, is there anything else about college that sticks out or that you really want to say that was an influential part of that time of your life?
People, there were just people that I really, that I just kind of influenced. And John Sullivan, who was he was my partner that I moved here with. And I met him. Charles D. Owen High School Band goes with football team to play T.C. Robertson High School in Asheville. We're getting our act ready to go into the stadium for the whatever. And he's on the wrestling team and whatever. Spoke to him then. Then later, when all the kids would go to get together at Asheville above the Toma Road and hang out at night and whatever like that, and probably smoke joints. I met him again. He would come to Western, and he was married and had 2 kids. And he would come to Western and go to the concerts. Black Oak, Arkansas, there's a band name from the past, and JoJo Gunn, something like that. And he would come to the ball games, and I mean, he would come to the concerts, and he would stay because I knew him. And I said, well, you can stay with me and my buddies.
And so had y'all stayed in touch since high school?
Not a lot, but he read Steve. He would run into my brother Steve, and then he would go, whatever, and Steve would go, well, you know, here's Gregg's info, whatever, because he said, John, I said, sure, that's fine.
And
I didn't know he was gay.
was he African American or white?
No, he was Cherokee.
Cherokee. Okay.
Daddy was Irish, and mother was full Cherokee, and stunning man, and really a motivated individual, just crazily motivated, and was wild about dogs. And
Now, had he gone to college or just got married out of high school?
he got married out of high school, had 2 kids, and would go on to become a veterinarian. But
So then he was coming to concerts in Cullowhee and staying with you, and is that when your relationship began?
No, well, that's when our acquaintance began, and because he stayed with me in a group, and sometimes he'd come and have like 2 or 3 of his friends, but his wife never came, and so he would just be there and all of that. And one visit, he just decided that it was time to test the water, and so late Gregg, and we got together.
And did he make the move?
Mm-hmm. Came to my room, made the move, and I'm brushing my teeth in the mirror, and all of a sudden there's someone standing behind me, but can I help you? And again, the fact that he had no clothes on
I was
kind
going
of
to
answered
say, I
that
guess you
question.
could help him.
Yeah,
Wow.
his being naked kind of helped that.
So how long, and we can pick this up later as we get, how long were you a couple then?
We moved 10 years. We moved here. I decided, well, I'm going to move to Atlanta because we came down here twice,
Right.
and he was coming from Asheville, and then finally he got a divorce and came to Raleigh with me.
Right. So then, and because I do want to get back to that, I'm just curious, so after 10 years, did you guys just decide to part ways?
I'm sorry. We moved here to Atlanta, and then August the 6th, 1986, he was at Lake Hartwell, you know, between North Carolina and Georgia, and was skiing with his father, uncle, brother, and niece. And these folks that had too much to drink didn't see him in the water, and that was the day I lost him.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and
I'm
we
so
were.
sorry.
And we were 2 weeks from our 10th anniversary. 2
I'm
weeks.
so sorry.
And incredible man. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful commitment there. Funny, you know, just roll with the punches kind of guy. Just incredible. And he was very supportive and was wonderful with me. Even here in the softball league, he'd go and help and do and whatever. Like that.
And we'll pick up on that.
Sure.
I'm sure that relationship is a huge part of your life, and I like to pick on that. I just want to jump back to college. So you're nearing your end of college, and what are you thinking you want to do when you graduate?
Teach.
Teach.
I got the
what?
education bug. To teach art, because the art department, it wasn't just the drama department, because I came out in the drama department, but the art department, because it was my sub. You know, I was doing biology and art because I liked both and I liked learning it, but it was what the art that I was. Other folks go, what kind of art were you doing? I was doing all of it. I was very
Painting,
interested.
sculpting,
History,
everything.
art history.
Art
I want to
history.
learn about Michelangelo. I want to hear more about this. I want to know what this whole thing with Da Vinci is. Why is this all over here? Why is Picasso such a nut, but his stuff is so fabulous? Whichever, and Banderas is doing a fabulous job on the TV show. And I wanted to know just all of that kind of stuff, but then what really kind of got me, and this is the part I could never explain to my mother because she still would fog over when I'd explain it, was passing that on, because I taught art history, lines, planes, cool colors, you know, convex, concave, you know, all of that, history. Do you understand what this is? The basis of a canvas. So I'm teaching beginning, and that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to planting that seed again.
So then you wanted to teach? Where did you start interviewing for jobs, and what led you to your first job?
Ray Lindsay didn't retire. He left Western as a teacher. And he left, right, it was my senior year, he left, and he'd been in my world, 3.5 years. And so he went back and he became the superintendent of schools for Wake County, Raleigh. And upon my graduating, or approaching it, I just sort of put out some info, and Dean McMurray just said, Mr. Professor Renzi, is maybe you might want to say that I'm going to send some info to him, and he just sort of was like, absolutely. I remember distinctly talking to him on the phone, and all this guy said for like 30 minutes was absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Now, was he gay or straight?
No, he was straight. He was straight. He was straight, I think, but I would say that he dabbled because he was always at the gay parties. Always at the gay parties.
With his wife?
She would come sometimes. I remember this guy falling off of a balcony and her helping him into the car, taking him to the hospital, yada, yada, yada. And it was a gay guy. And sticking with them the whole bit, doing the correspondence with mom, letting them know, I think his parents were from Louisville, all that kind of stuff. And her making some kind of comment about, well, that's really a tough queen. You just got something, like that. And I just thought, isn't that interesting? It's his wife. So anyway, went there and...
And so you went to Raleigh, and what school, what grade level were you?
8th grade.
What school were you at?
Enloe Junior High. I probably would have taught longer if it hadn't have been for that war with puberty they always talk about.
I would think junior high would be the roughest age.
Tough. 12-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a good choice. And I just didn't win the thing.
And
even though I liked my kids and I got along, but the communication, you're not as absorbing. If I'd have taught older, or maybe college or something else, whatever like that, where you had an interest in why you were in
Did you just get routed to junior high, or did someone...
It was what was
consider you
available.
okay.
It was what was available. Yeah, and because I was coming in and, I had a BA in art, but they would, I'd have to go up and do more, I'd have to go to school longer, maybe get a master's.
So were you able to teach them art history too, or is it mainly just technique and like what you would think of as an art class?
Art
Oh,
history.
wow, that's great.
Art
I
history.
didn't have that in junior high. We would have art class, but it was
Right.
drawing or
Right.
painting.
Inland was incredibly advanced. It was a really, really good school, and Dr. Menzie really flattered me with it. He said, you'll be wonderful there. He says, it'll be really, really good. He goes, and he even did we're gonna have to sort of, he goes, Raleigh's not the most liberal area, which is one of the reasons that we didn't stay in Raleigh.
So you were there 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm assuming you were not able to be out at work during that time?
No, I didn't do it at work. I wasn't out at work, but I did Raleigh's gay thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talk to me about your 2 years in Raleigh from the gay angle.
Well, the bars, they had quite a few. And
What are they?
Capitol Corral. Did you?
Yes.
The Mousetrap.
Now, I don't know, where was the Mousetrap?
Mousetrap was other side of state.
Okay.
Other side of NC State.
Toward Cary?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm gonna say it's almost in Cary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Never heard that one.
Yeah, Capitol Corral. Well, Mousetrap was really small.
Capitol Corral's gone now. It's like a high-end little restaurant cafe.
Really?
There's one bar, maybe two left down there.
I found in all of my digging out of stuff, they had those chips. Because it used to you could get double cocktail discount, whatever, what I'm saying. So I found my Capitol Corral chips. I liked the Capitol Corral. It was a very interesting place, and John liked it because he could go play pool, and he got in them, they were all that. But it was, so that was probably one of the few things I liked. I made a lot of friends there. I mean, a lot. And, just really advanced my knowledge of, the whole gay spectrum, especially since this is where I have now left college to be, you are an adult.
You're an adult, you're
your
first.
own, yeah.
And what were your parents' reaction to you becoming a teacher?
Oh, well, my mom was the one that we had to improve on. Everybody else was yay, and I am one of the older of the grandkids. And so the fact that I wasn't the first to get a whatever, but, to be one of the ones to move up, because my, Cassandra, who is the eldest of the grandkids, she moved on, she became the district attorney for the city of Philadelphia. And her lover, Sophie, yes, who is Jewish, that's where the capiche comes from, were kind of spearheading the whole grandkids thing and whatever. And she was out. She was really out. And God rest her, she had an aneurysm and passed away on us. So, but I was really proud of her. Just out there, couldn't be stopped. And she's where I learned to maintain calm. And when anything wants to really sort of terrorize you or beat you up with some kind of interrogation or whatever, get calm and take your King's English level up and watch how that just sort of changes the battle, and all of a sudden you're superior. And I do it to this day. And it's a flip. It's just my brother, Brad, will even joke about it. He'll go, oh God, he's flipping the switch. So you
said that the family was supportive of you being a teacher, but you mentioned something about your mom. You had to sort of...
My mother wanted me to be a scientist. And my mother was very stubborn.
Even after you changed your major
and got good at it.
She was still thinking he's going to be a scientist.
Well, and everybody, even one of my teachers, I see her, I can't remember the name, but said, because my mom was, being a pain about it. And so she goes, well, this is going to make your mom happy, whatever, because you're nailing this. And then my mother was like, oh, this is great, this is cute. Mm-hmm. But she was very, I think one of the things, John had an effect on her, and John had an effect on my father. I'll never forget, we coming by the house from school. This is when we moved to Raleigh and we were moving stuff and had come by. And my dad had this thing, we've never had a white person sit in our den. You could do it in the front room, but in the den, there never was. I tell this, people go, show you how your family was segregated? And I went, well, I guess, but there was never a white person sat in our den. And
because I'm assuming the front room was a little more
you
formal.
came in, you could sit in the front room. The den was where you kicked back, and my daddy had the lazy boy, and there's the couch, and there's the shelf with the encyclopedias, Britannica, whatever. We had that, and the big black and white RCA with the whatever. And I'll never forget, we were in the house just for a few minutes, and where's John? And we're John. And Steve goes, oh, he's in the den with Dad. And my mother and I go, the den? And we go turn around, and they're in there, and there's a football game on. And
so since he was American Indian, was he fairly light?
He was brown. He was, well, like I said.
His last name, would you know he was Indian by his last name?
His last name was Sullivan, John Sullivan. And that was Sullivan, and that's his father. His father was Irish.
Oh, okay, right. So the name wouldn't have given it away.
But he was very black hair. Mm-hmm. That's about all that would give you the thing. And his skin was, he had a tan and brownish. It was brownish.
How long were you two together before you introduced him to your family? Maybe a year. So you were still in college?
I was coming out of college.
And how did you initially broach the subject of, oh, I have this person, John, in my life, to your family? I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
That all I just remembered saying is that there's someone special that I like a lot, and I did that, and my mother went, oh, I remember, and who was there? Someone guessed that it was him, and that was it.
So they had met him before just as a
Yeah,
friend?
because he'd been around.
Just he's a friend?
Yeah. Well, I used to in high school, when, like I told you, you'd go up to Tunnel Road and go up on top of Tunnel Road with the city and the boys, and you'd have over here making out in the car, and the rest of the guys are hanging around, and yes, the marijuana was flying and whatever and all of that, you know, and because it was like 71, 72. And so that's when I met him and his friends. And I talked about him, I mentioned him, and then I would, because we'd go and hook up again from time to time, my group and his group and the other schools and whatever. And so they had heard of him, you know, and then even met him once when he came to Black Mountain to go do something. And came to Black Mountain with his wife. And my mom met him, yeah, you know, we were out, we weren't at my house though, it was like out at Ingalls or whatever. And they were aware of him.
So then when you said, I have someone special in my life and someone guessed it, which what was your parents' reaction or your family's reaction?
The great one was my mother. Just, she immediately went into the, oh really? He is absolutely charming. She goes, well, that's good. And she goes, how long? And I went, whatever. Her whole thing was, how long have you kept this a secret? And don't keep secrets from me. That was the big thing. I remember my friends going, so what did your mother say? She was just conscious that I wasn't keeping a secret for too long and that this was something, whatever. They're going, not really. I went, yeah, really. That was it. That was about it.
How about your grandmother?
My grandmother, we told her, and then he was there, and he was unloading or loading the car, and all of a sudden I turned around, and she was gone, and I could see out the picture window, I could see her going, and she went and got him and hugged him.
That's great.
Yeah. It was just incredible.
How did Brad and Steve get along with John?
Pretty good. Well, Brad was very small, but Steve and him were fine because Steve had gone with, because they would sit at ball games, you know, and because we would go and do football things or whatever. And so he would go when John would go, but this was John going. And so they kind of got to know each other, got to be chummy. I don't remember a lot of hanging out because he wasn't, once we were packing up and going to Raleigh, you know, it would have to be me coming home and whatever. And in that case, you know, he lived in Asheville. His family was from Arden, which is the other side of Asheville. And that's where his family was.
Now, did he move to Raleigh and live in Raleigh with you?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was probably assumed that was going to happen by your family. It wasn't a big deal. Interesting.
They had to hear that. I mean, I'd had to tell them, but yeah.
And did they have any?
The biggest thing was, so where are you living? So do they have their act together? Is it cool? And Raleigh had a reputation for being kind of red, just country bigoted. It's the reason I left. Because I was not.
It was not the way people think of Raleigh now. It was a different place.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was bigoted.
What part of the city did you live in?
I lived near state. I lived near the state campus. I had a wonderful apartment.
And for people who aren't aware, NC State University is a major university in Raleigh.
And it's it's in town, like Georgia State University is in downtown Atlanta. And it was, but it was, near a park, I can't remember that. But it was, had a wonderful apartment. The apartment was upstairs, just, you know.
And what did John do while you were in Raleigh?
He worked for it was an animal rescue, and he went there, and actually he met a lot of folks that kind of really helped him with the transition here, in being a vet, because he was a veterinarian.
So talk to me. You've been in Raleigh a year and a half or whatever, and you said you're thinking you want to go. Talk to me about your thought process of deciding to leave your teaching job, and how you decided where you were going to go and what you were going to do.
Well, one of the things at this point, we'd already come to Atlanta for a couple of times,
Just to visit.
Just to visit, bar hop, you know, whatever. And we did it several times with, you know, some Raleigheites, you know, whenever we pack it up and come down here. And then one of the things I had done was when I was in college, we would, well, even one year I was at UT, and we would go to the Carousel. And at the Carousel, I met Charlie Brown.
And tell people what the Carousel was and where it was.
Carousel was a gay bar in Knoxville, Tennessee. This was back in 67, 68.
So was Charlie Brown from there?
She's from Tennessee.
So she was somewhere up there?
Yeah, but she was performing at the Carousel, which was very popular, big gay bar, mega gay bar in Knoxville. And I only met her by just tipping her. That's all the way I met her. Then, in my coming down here, I met Charlie. I'd run into her again, and we got to know each other. And of course, in the long run, we really got to know each other because I work with her a lot. And then I also met Lisa King. And then what happened is in '78, they had the Miss Gay America pageant. Lisa was in it. And I came down early in April and just was talking to her and all this kind of stuff. And she said, "You can stay at my house." And I thought, okay. So me and John stayed at her house and the Wishing Well Apartments on Buford Highway. And her roommate was there, this guy, Frank. And we stayed there, kind of ran around, got more into seeing things and whatever like that, because I love drag. And of course getting these large gay bars in Atlanta and that whole thing. And that's when I just went, this is wonderful, this is great. And John was like, oh, praise his name. Thank God. Are we leaving Raleigh and moving to Atlanta? Say yes. And I went, yes. And so then got out, Lisa, the whole bit and all of that. But then one of the things was that Lisa said, because I cooked, just to say thank you.
Right.
And she goes, "Can you do this all the time?" And he goes, "Yep, 24/7. John's helping me." So then Lisa said, "Well, why don't you move in? And it looks like you're getting ready to," and then, you know.
So then were four of you sharing an apartment?
We shared, yes, we did. And it, because it's an upstairs, downstairs kind of thing, whatever. And we would, and John and I. Yeah.
So now Lisa King, she was a drag queen here in Atlanta. Was she from Atlanta?
She was a goddess. She's originally from Florida. She is, she's passed on, but she is extraordinary Atlanta legend as far as an entertainer. Amazing diva. Something that we don't really have a lot of right now, where, our female impersonators, just were stunning then.
So when you and John decided to move, you knew you were going to be moving in with Lisa and her roommate there on Buford Highway. Did you have any employment lined up before you moved?
And I decided that I basically wasn't sure I wanted. No, I did know. I wanted to work in the gay community.
So you knew that coming here you weren't necessarily interested in going into a teaching job.
Even though I did 4 interviews. I did 4 school interviews. One of them was Grady, high school. And one of the ones that I did think about, and they changed the name now, but it's over there where Lullwater is, but it's not, that wasn't the name of it, and it was a school thing. And I looked at that. And then what happened was, we weren't here but like 10 days. And I went to take Lisa's clothes to the Sweet Gunhead, where she performed, which is Cheshire Bridge. And went in, and I'd been introduced earlier to the manager, John Austin, who's the manager of the Sweet Gunhead. And John, I came in, and John, and the usual thing, he'd come in and he'd go, "How far behind you?" And I said, "Probably 2 hours." He goes, "Good, she'll be early tonight." And we'd all laugh. And John, and then I went and did the clothes and whatever. And John introduced me to Bob Swindon. And Bob Swindon is the publisher of Cruise Magazine. And John was just doing this whole thing about prepping me to Bob just like crazy. He's wonderful, whatever. So then I got, Bob said, I'd like to chat with you. And we went to lunch the next day, the four of us. He and I and Jim Heverly. Jim Heverly was the art director of Cruise Magazine. He was Bob's right-hand co-person. And Jim would later go on to found Etc. Magazine. And we had a conversation, and I was asked, well, would you like to start to work? And you'll be selling ads. He says, I'm going to teach you the industry inside out. And I make no bones about it. I am grateful to Bob Swindon for what I do today, 40 years later, because he taught me the inside out of marketing, publication, the industry, the yada yada. And I'm a publisher now, going to be in 30 years in August, thanks to Bob Swindon. And also one of the other things I'm also grateful to him, and I would not have happened. I was the first African American working for any gay publication in this city or in the region, as far as I knew, that was working for the publication, not taking out the trash or mowing the yard.
And that was 78?
This would have, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was at work before Christmas with him, and I got here October 6th.
Right.
And then, and he took me to Backstreet and to the Armory, because Backstreet and the Armory both required all black people trying to get into the bar to show a separate ID. And Bob took me in, and I met with Carmine Vera, who owned Backstreet. And he took me to Carmine, met him, yada yada, met Peaches, who was the originator of Peaches Back Door, which became Backstreet. And I'll never forget the conversation, because I'd heard quite a few things about Mr. Vera and about his temper and so forth. And Bob, all 5'2" of him, just pretty much looked at him and said, this is Gregg, he's my new employee. Should he ever be asked for a second ID, or should he or anyone with him ever be asked for a second ID or anything other than just show your ID and please come into the build, those rates you've been enjoying for all those years? And it literally said to him, you can put your head between your legs and kiss them goodbye. And I didn't put that in my bio because we're trying to keep it. But
So just,
sure.
I want to pause right there. You mentioned Cruise, and I know what it was, but for people who don't and people in the future may be listening,
Sure.
give a description of
Sure.
what Cruise Magazine was, what magazines like Cruise, what purpose they served in the gay community at the time, and what were other gay publications in Atlanta at that time.
Cruise Magazine, Cruise had three publications. You had Cruise Magazine, which was a weekly publication that primarily gave you events of where to go and what to do. Told you what the bars were doing, told you what the restaurants were doing. There were lots of photos and interviews of performers throughout the city. They also did that was a digest-sized publication. They also produced a national cruise publication, which was a magazine, 8.5 by 11 magazine-size publication that went out to 26 cities, I believe. The other publications in Atlanta at that time was Around the Clock, there was Pulse, there was Guide Magazine.
And were they similar in their focus?
Very much so. It was about the bars and what was going on. There would be, the difference between some, especially with Pulse, was it would be newsy. And it would tell you some national stuff, but also newsy things about Atlanta people and so forth and go on. And do interviews. And, and especially when we moved more into an AIDS awareness, they really had that going on. It was basically to keep you aware of what was going on as far as just things in the community. This was your only source of knowledge of what was going on and what was to do and what was going to happen, because there was no IT. So, it was very important. And one of the differences between now and then was the number of publications that had to be produced, the numbers that we had to schlep and get out and go with were intense, but they were just gobbled up. It was nothing to have Backstreet say, we've run out of the 20,000 books you gave us, and this is a weekly publication.
Right. Now you said that Cruise produced 3 publications. What was the?
There was a cruise newspaper-ish, and it was a Atlanta, Florida. There were a lot of publications that did that. David Magazine was one of them. There were several, and Night Scene was a newspaper. Both of those were, and they always said Georgia, Florida. But I always said Atlanta, Florida, because it was Atlanta. Because in Florida there were many gay villages or cultured communities. And we were it in this state as far as I was concerned. And they really did a mix of stuff. I would say that David Magazine back then was more Florida. And we had a few pages for Atlanta in that. But Night Scene was the opposite. Night Scene was an Atlanta-based publication that also did Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. And
when did Night Scene end publication?
Night Scene never made the 90s.
I was going to say, I came in '89 and I don't remember that title.
It didn't go long. Because obviously with all of this recent restructuring things that I've been pulling out from that trunk I drug around for 40 years, you're welcome. The one thing I have learned is that it was not long, and quizzing people, my old buddies, whatever they go, it was just not around long.
I have a question, and it's probably before your time, but I have actually, Diamond Little gave me 2 issues, and I've talked to other people, and their sporadic knowledge. Do you remember anyone talking about, it was a digest-sized publication called the Chanticleer. It was from the early to mid-'70s, because I actually have 2 issues, and one of the issues has an ad for Atlanta's newest disco opening, Backstreet.
Oh my God. No, I've never heard the Chanticleer. And see, that was one of the things with all of these very old publications that I got. There was The Voice and The News, which were put out mid-'70s. One of the things is that Bob kept them. And so when he passed away and Cruise was folding, the guys that were taking the stuff to go make, etc., just took what they wanted. And then I said, well, what about all these photos and other books? And they went, well, let Lloyd throw them away. Well, no. Greg pulled the car up and popped the trunk and, John, honey. And so, yeah, I even took the file cabinet.
So what year did Cruise stop or end?
It stopped, was it 85? Yeah, because I wasn't there. Bob got sick. We lost him to the plague. And then they went for a year without him there. And then they just folded. So it was 86. It was in the fall, 85, 86.
So you arrived in Atlanta in '78, and you make this connection with Bob at Cruise Magazine, etc. Besides your job, what other things were you doing in Atlanta at the time? Were you politically engaged? Were you involved in church or other activities? Or what was your life like in general?
It had a lot to do with the magazine, but with that, I just became quite involved with a lot of stuff. I remember meeting all these people, because they're not through business, bar owners, and things of that nature. I got in a lot of being around the pageant industry, because, well, I lived with Lisa King. And so then there was this whole, thing with the pageant industry. And then I had this, just a lot of folks with that. I don't remember any church thing that I did. Well, MCC, but that was kind of later. It wasn't.
Right. So when you first got here in '78, etc. Pardon the pun.
Sure.
You obviously focused on your job. It was LGBT life was very bar-centric. Right. What is your memory of any political things going on pre-AIDS? Were there protests for equal rights?
The only thing I remembered that were negatives would be around Pride, because I was very involved with Pride, and I got very involved with. And I remember the Pride marches, And when you got down by that Baptist church, the people with the signs, that kind of stuff. And then in the really early on phases of it, there's just a lot that I don't really remember that was
So
kind of.
you were very focused on your job in the
I
bar
did,
scene,
but
right?
but because the job was a lot. Because
Oh, yeah.
other than doing my thing with going out and meeting folks and working on pulling in, editorials or getting them to be an advertiser or whatever like that. My other thing I did, and this was really good advice on Bob's part, it was to get me acquainted with whatever. So Jim Heverly was our photographer, so I would roll with Jim, constantly going and taking photos, and we would go to our library, we'd go to these bars that were kind of out in the little neighborhoods, whatever, most were in town, do that, and of course, whenever there was a crowd, give Greg the camera because he could be over everybody. So there was that. And then, again, this was all before, then the big thing that kind of came into my world was softball. I played 16 years.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on that because I know that's a big part. I just lost my train of thought.
I need to take a break.
Okay, you
Go
did.
to the bathroom.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I know the history of Backstreet and Armory requiring the second ID for African Americans. When did that end, if you know? And well, first let you answer.
One of the things that when I got the clue that it had stopped was the change in manager. As soon as God, do Michael's last name. It'll come to me in a minute. He was manager for a very, very long time of Backstreet. Loved him to death because he was so tall. And he became manager. And one of the things that was really, really instrumental in that, and he hired Charlie Brown. And that's when Charlie Brown started her cabaret. And then the cast was Lena Lust and several others. And they had several of black girls that were in the cast, but there just became more and more and more. All of a sudden, with Michael's coming on, you now have black bartenders. And then you've got just more and more.
And would this been still in the 70s or would this been in the 80s?
No. This was 80s. You're catching me on.
Don't worry, there's not.
Well, it's going to be a little bit of a fog for me to give you an exact date and whatever.
Mid-80s.
But no, we're talking early.
Early.
We're talking about 80, 81, and also with all of this, you have to kind of realize that the AIDS thing hadn't really woken up yet.
Right.
So, but the gay rights thing was, and it was a biggie.
And from what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 2ID issue was not limited solely to Backstreet and Armory. It was more common than.
It was more common than a lot of folks thought. But the thing is that the bars that didn't do it were all of a sudden became not quiet about it. I mean, it was in a couple of publications. Bob, I remember the fact that Bob was pissed off that he wasn't the first one to put something in Cruise about it. But he didn't. But it came out, I forget who did it. Oh, I remember who did it. There was a thing, it was from one of the Florida publications doing a thing, kind of hitting at Atlanta for doing that, because in Florida it was unheard of. They just, anybody can come in, I don't care who you are, whatever. And they were hitting at Atlanta because of that. But one of the bars, which I found out, the Cove, was real big about not even, and they
Tell people where the Cove was.
I remembered the Cove, which was down on Monroe Drive, now the backside of the Atlanta Botanical Gardens.
It's where you turn in to get to the parking deck.
Correct. There's now a parking deck that allows you to go to the Botanical Gardens, and that is where they were. Right down from Dutch Valley Apartments, which was the ultra gay mega apartments for everybody. But the Cove was real big about not bothering with that or having any problems with that. And of course the Cove was one of the big 24-hour bars along with Backstreet. As a matter of fact, some folks would go and be at Backstreet till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then go to the Cove at 9 a.m. and, okay, I have to go to work now. And I remember the part where John and I had a conversation going, okay, you realize it's time out, we gotta stop, okay. So,
So during this time when some of the bars were asking for 2 pieces of ID, did you ever hear discussion, or was there talk of boycotts or not going to
a lot
those
of folks
bars?
did not go. A lot of folks did not go.
So they may not have gone and just not gone, but was it ever vocalized as, hey, we should take a stand and not go to these bars?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I do remember that there was definite conversations about this is wrong, and this is just not. But not long after me being here, they stopped it.
Did you get a sense or what was your sense of the racial divide within the LGBT community here when you arrived?
I got that there was, and interestingly enough, with as much as I had to do with the Armory, it was around there. Because the Army was my second softball adventure. My first was the bar on Peachtree. But but coming into their world, I found this prejudice and just very ignorant and very stupid. And it went on for very many years. And it's interesting how some of the folks that I knew through my time there, for the different things I did there,
Right.
that are still around and still doing things. And I learned, I was surprised.
Right.
I was
Right.
just surprised.
And we will pick up on the baseball thing, because I know
Sure.
it's a huge part of your life. What was your experience, or talk to me a little bit about African-American gay bars at the time? Because as a white gay man,
Right.
I still don't get a lot of information
Sure.
about that, and I'm just personally interested, in addition to people
There
listening
was,
to this.
there was a trip. So on Spring Street, just shy of the Varsity Restaurant, you come back here, and all of this, and there was Club 68. I remember going in there and it was my first all-black gay bar. And it was...
Describe it. Was it a dance club? Was it just
Yeah.
a bar?
Oh, of course it was a dance club. Are you kidding? The parking lot was the dance club. It was small. And I remember the one thing I kept saying was, it's dark in here. And John going, don't make some ethnic whatever. So I'm like, I don't mean the lighting, Myrtle. I'm talking about it's dark in here. Turn the damn lights up. So, it's just, it was a very interesting bar. It was very packed. And then, something shack. I almost said the name. It was downtown, and you were around, I can't do the name right now, but there was a something shack, and it was downtown. And you went up these steps, and that was amazing.
Roughly where downtown? Near the Capitol, or give a general area?
So, near Grady.
Near Grady, okay.
Near Grady, because you could see 85. And you went, and you got out, you parked, you got out, and you had the very city office steps, big broad steps that raised the whole thing up. And there was this building with other stuff in it. It was it was an office building by day, and the bar was there by night. And
it was a dance club as well?
Oh my God, that was the main feature. And I loved it. And they had the boys on the pedestals.
Yeah,
And
describe it inside.
inside, it was very colorful. And it had the very streamery thing. The DJ's up here. It was really big. It didn't last long. Club Shack. That's what it was. It was Club Shack. And even to this day, I was like, can we work on the name? But Club Shack, not doing much for me. But it was very interesting. I met a lot of guys there that later were on the Pride Committee. I remembered meeting Wayne Vassy, who founded the Black Pride, what we have today. He founded that, and I did a piece on him in my Pulse magazine article about him. And it was an interview that I did with him. And one of my many interviews on the patio at the bar on Peachtree, thank you, Dennis, was my other office. but that club was really good. And the difference between the two was the Club Shack, they should have switched their names. Club Shack was nice, was together, loved the vibe. You know, you can go to a place and everybody, the employees are happy and friendly and whatever. You know it's reflecting right back on management. I mean, you know, if you've been around for a minute, you know that. The bartenders are speaking friendly, everybody's happy, everything's a go, 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 whatever kind of place. And bright, and you could see things, and it's lit, and bowls of the goldfish on the bar with the dance, and you're up here like this, and then to go to the dance floor, you just got a couple of steps. And so you can be up and around at the dance floor, and it's not like way downstairs, but it's
Right.
2 steps down. Very nice set, beautiful hardwood floors. Money had been spent on this place, or as I did learn, was a nice place that it was closed. They just turned it into the gay bar. And that's the Shack, the 68 down there, which actually I think is the address.
688.
688.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then it became Weekends at one
Mhm.
point, much later.
Was it
I think Weekends moved there much later.
from Weekend's Warehouse on
Peachtree.
Peachtree, which is where I met RuPaul.
So describe the
Yeah.
680, the club. You said that the Club
688.
Shack was nice. Describe
Very, very
the
nice.
688.
Dark, really, really seedy. Too many people standing around, and especially this incredible amount of entrepreneurial going on the back side of the bar, especially at night.
In terms of
Selling drugs or peddling, between their legs.
Right.
And a lot of it. And even to the point that, where was that? There was a baths down on the side road. It blew up. Yes, there was a baths down there that, I hadn't thought about that in years. There was a baths down in this back road, and it was parallel to 85, and so I think
And
it's
there's one there now.
Flex,
Yeah.
yeah, but it wasn't there. And I remember the night it blew up, and I was at the Answer Lounge on Peachtree Street, and there was this explosion, and later they come to find out that, and I think he went to prison. Some gentleman that owned Locker Room was in on. There were bar wars then, because I was even told not to talk to certain. I had Bob gave me this list that Jim made of do not talk to these people. But anyway, with the 688 had some affiliations with this place.
So it was blown up by, the baths were blown up by a competitor.
Correct. And the Babs, but I went to that club thing down there. I'm going to do the name. I will. And I remembered going in, and it was a trailer, and you just went down it, and there was these rooms, with the curtains that you could pull and go in and do a video and whatever else. And then at the end, you went in and you paid, and then you went into a room. There's a building. So there was a building, and they decided to put the trailer next to it to expand it.
Wow.
And it was all right there. And I remember the night it blew up. I saw it burning. And I was at the Answer. Oh, there's been an explosion. And After Dark. Club After Dark. That was the name of it.
Was anyone injured or killed?
About 5 or 6 people died.
Mhm.
Yeah, burned.
Roughly what year would that have been?
Very early. 79, 80. 79, 80, yeah. 79.
And what was the club you mentioned that you were at when you heard it again? Say that again.
The Answer. The Answer Lounge.
Oh, the Answer Lounge. Where was that? I've not heard of that.
Peachtree, and so there was the bank is at 13 Vickeries and 13th
Like Peachtree,
Peachtree 13. There was a grocery store across the street that was there forever. Max Supermarket. Across the street from that was the Answer Lounge, and the Answer Lounge became Metropolis, and Sonny Moon owned that, and he also owned the Midtown Times. We were major friends.
And what was the Answer Room like? Was it
A big drag bar,
a drag bar?
huge drag bar. It was Midtown's biggest drag bar. The other drag bar was the Onyx, which was downtown where Peachtree and West Peachtree come together. that far downtown. And that's where Amber Richards and Tasha Wallace and them performed. But the Answer Lounge was huge. I mean, they had a cast, and it was one of the first times I'd really seen a lot of the male entertainers. And it was this, you know, they might get a little skimpy with the clothing, but these guys did the same thing the girls did. Learn the song, perform it, give me a costume, whatever. If you want to flash some butt, that's fine, but learn the song, priority number one, learn the song and give it. And they had production numbers and just add it.
So describe the Onyx Lounge.
The Onyx
It's
Lounge
not
was
outlook.
smaller, but really, just an archive. Because I remembered the columns and the marble floor. And you went in this building, and it was like a hotel. Because you know, right in that corner of Peachtree, and back in the day, and they had that building over there that's got the divide and the streets coming around it. And it was surprising to have the gay down there. I didn't just, but
How long was that around?
it was there until probably about 83, 84. It had been here a while before I moved here. Because I did the interview with Chuck Kane, who told me all about the history of Atlanta. And he did, which I found and I've retyped, and he mentioned the Onyx being one of the the Onyx being around probably since the early 70s.
So it was in a hotel?
Mm-hmm.
It said it was marble? So
Beautiful
upscale,
floors,
sort
beautiful
of?
marble, you know, the columns as you came in, and then the big black and white checks, which are very old school. You don't, but you saw that and went, all right.
So they did drag, was it a dance club as well? Or mainly just drag shows?
You came in and sat.
So describe the Answer Room. How was that inside?
The Answer was huge, and you came in very ground level, all this kind of stuff. Even had code check, and then you went in. It sat. It was functioned to deal with 500 people seated.
With tables?
Yeah, so you could or not. You could sit, or you could be up around like this, facing the stage, and the stage was huge.
Was it an old theater that had been repurposed?
I think so. I don't know, but I think so. Because it was just too perfectly set up for. And it and Illusions were very laid out a lot, where it was a long run, and just tables. And then this is stools and our standing area. And the difference.
Was it in a building, or was it in its own building, or was it part of a strip of buildings on Peachtree?
It's in its own building.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's not, but the building's still there.
How long was the Answer Room in existence, roughly?
A long time. The Answer was there into the late 80s.
And did you mention Illusions? Tell people
Illusions is on
where that was.
Illusions is on Peachtree Street. Its front door faces right out into Peachtree Street, whereas Answer was kind of on the side. Illusions was the Showplace of the South. Their cast was awesome. Just the Illusions cast, along with the Sweet Gunhead and Hollywood Hots, did Atlanta proud. Their Illusions went on for a long, long time. Illusions was around into the 90s. And this is where Bertha Butts and, Vicki Lawrence and all of that. But they specialized in glamour.
And where was that on Peachtree?
10th and 13th, right in the middle.
Right.
Today, it is a gentleman's club. The very same building, they just changed the doors and changed the name, and it's darkened, and it's called like the Ultimate Gentleman something, another Monique, whatever.
Is it on the same side of the street now as Cafe Intermezzo on that side, or is it on the other side of the street?
It's on the side of Cafe Intermezzo.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
More toward 10th Street?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And you drive by, it's all darkened, and it's a jungle.
Yes.
And it's right in the
many
middle.
call-outs over the years.
Yeah, it has. And and they were a huge client of mine. Huge client of mine.
So you mentioned Hollywood Hots. I've heard that name.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that bar, where it was, how it looked.
Hollywood Hots. Oh my God, yes, this is a wonderful story. So Hollywood Hots is over on Cheshire Bridge in the Tara Shopping Center near the theater, the Tara Plaza Theater between La Vista and Cheshire Bridge. And you go over into where the theater is. And back there, they had Hollywood Hots, which had Roski Fernandez and many of the other girls. And it was located right beside the locker room baths. And I love this because one of the first things, Lisa took me there when we just had gotten here. We hadn't even been here a month. And we went over there because of her buddies. We had to go and run into just all her buddies. And because Lily White was doing some work over there. Anyway, we go in, and the one thing that just completely blew me away, because John just had to go in the baths, but I went in, whatever. Then all of a sudden, a door opens. You're in there and you're watching the show, and the door opens, and here comes John and some other guys in their towels. So you could go in the baths, and then you could come in and watch the drag show, and you didn't have to, the only requirement they had was that there needs to be underwear under that towel or you ain't going nowhere. And so they'd come in and watch the shows and whatever, but they had a really large space, and they could be they could be on a stage, or they could come down and there was a performance thing and you're sitting at tables and whatever, and major production numbers. I mean, easily sometimes a production number with 12 to 15 people in it, men and women, just rehearsed out the night.
And was it solely a performance venue?
Correct.
It wasn't like a dance club after the show?
No.
Okay.
It was just to perform. I think they did have Monday nights that was just disco.
Okay.
There was no drag shows on Monday night, and you could go and dance.
So then the locker room, the baths were next door. Can you describe those a little bit as to what they
You
were?
went in, you checked yourself into a locker room, you had water to swim in, they had that, they had a couple of spas, they had a pool, they had also sauna, all of that, and you had these little rooms that you could go in and be in there by yourself until you cracked your door and someone came in and joined you. And then after therapy, you could go and put your little towel on, underwear please, and you go through this door into, they had a bar in the locker room baths too. And you could go in and sit down and watch the drag show until you wanted to. You could stay all night, because you could rent this room. And
is that roughly where the Publix grocery store is now, that part of the shopping center?
Publix is over here, they were over here. Eden. Return to Eden.
Okay, on that side, okay.
Mm-hmm. And they moved some of the things around because there's also a pet thing there. And so the Return to Eden and that pet thing collectively was the locker room. This was pretty big, pretty big. I mean, you could have...
And how long did the locker room stay in existence until?
The locker room went away, and then they redid because Ron Sanford opened...
There was a bar when I moved here in the late 80s. Lipsticks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bar, but I want to say, I think I went there one time, and I want to say there was almost like a jacuzzi or something.
Mm-hmm.
That was a remnant of the
locker
bar.
room. Yeah, it was. What happened, they redid that space. All of that they made one, is what they did. But what they did is sort of they kind of took away the chunk between it, because some of the items from the locker room baths, I think they just couldn't get rid of it because we got this big old pole, and this is going to cost a pretty penny to remove, so let's don't. So, because you kind of had the pool there, but you could still perform, and they did that. Lipsticks was a good bar, and because I see the guy that owned it, I see his former partner at Rocks every now and then. He bartends there.
It doesn't seem like it was there that long.
But it had a great cast. Really great cast, and a lot of folks moving around. And a lot of folks moving around because Sweet Gum had closed.
Yeah, my sense is that closed in the mid-80s. And talk to me a little bit about Sweet Gum Head, because that's always a bar that comes up as one of the bars in Atlanta, and one of the ones that I would love to have seen.
Unbelievable.
And it opened I want to say from what I've heard, in the early to mid-70s.
Yeah, it was
and
open.
It was here through the mid-80s.
74. It opened, and then it was around till the mid-80s, easily, like 87, 88.
Talk to people about where the Sweet Gum Head was, what it was, describe it inside, and then talk to them about the production.
It was a legendary place. Where it was on Cheshire Bridge, and when you get to Cheshire Bridge, there's the not the Dunkin' Dine, it's the
Landmark Diner?
Landmark Diner, thank you very much. And then across the street from the Landmark Diner, there's this building. And on the back side of this building, Waffle House is over here, and you got the Opus one right here. And in the back side of that building, there is a titty bar.
And the most recent gay iteration, I know from a few years back, was called Bliss.
Bliss.
And I kept telling people, I went there for time, I said, this is where the Sweet Gum
The
Head
Sweet Gum Head. The Sweet Gum had the same facility. So where this bar, the titty bar is now, is where the Sweet Gum Head was. And it's on the back side of the building that's there. It was an incredible facility. You went in, the girls' hall had the dressing rooms are upstairs. They had some guys in there. You went in and you could sit on the levels like this. You could go upstairs, you could sit on levels like this or on the floor.
With tables?
With tables everywhere. With a waiter coming to you and tables. It was like a cabaret. And then you had, the bar was a big oval. And you could go around it, you could sit at the bar on the sides, this was standing, this could sit. And then you could go in and sit all the way to the floor. They could sit right at 800 people, and they did it on a regular basis. The cast was awesome, phenomenal. You know, Lily White, Satan DeVille, John Greenwell, who just wrote a book. He was Rachel Wells. I'll never forget, as long as I live, walking in, turning around, and here is Paul Lynde in a gold, sparkly jumpsuit, unzipped to here, just doing autographs and being all of this and just being Queenie out, and I am just like, OMG. And then he goes, and then I came back about another night or so, whatever the weekend, and I would see folks all the time. I saw Michael Landon there. I saw, and then 2 or 3 times we saw Burt Reynolds because of the Cannonball was filmed in Atlanta, Georgia.
Cannonball Run.
Cannonball Run,
Smokey and the Bandit.
yeah. Smokey and the Bandit. Smokey and the Bandit was the first one, and it was filmed here. And so I saw him, but this whole thing where you go there and there would just be these, you know, incredible.
Was he with women? Was Burt Reynolds with women? Would other people come, or was it just him by himself?
Burt Reynolds was with a group.
Because my sense is that the Sweet Gum Head attracted both
it was
gay and straight.
It was mixed. It was mixed.
So it was known outside the gay community.
Totally mixed. There was, I can't do names, but there was this one other child that, I'll do it in a minute. She's the singer that you see her now in the commercials with the pink hair.
Cyndi Lauper.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, she was there several times. And I remembered one thing was taking Lisa's clothes, because I will take Lisa's clothes, I'll tell you about that. And she was in the dressing room, just hanging with the girls, and just smoking a cigarette and hanging out in the dressing room. And so the Sweet Gum Head was a very mixed place, and it was the alpha. It was nothing to have the folks from Creative Loafing or whatever in there interviewing or whatever. You could go into any most straight publications and find stuff about the Sweet Gum Head and about the whatever. Very classy, and for the size and so forth and so on, not that the others were trashy, whatever, clean, OMG. Impeccable. Everything was just clean. Because I'd go in the daytime, sometimes with Lisa, for rehearsals. And it was nothing to have everything outside.
Why do you think it closed?
Well, management, the owner management passed. And John Austin wanted to run it, and he did for several years. And I don't know what happened, but his cast shifted away on him. They shifted away. They went other places. And there was, because Brown and all them went to Backstreet, and Lena Luss went to Backstreet, and several of the girls.
Some people will ask, do you know the history of the name Sweet Gum Head?
I don't.
Just curious, because I've heard some stories say that the sweet gum is, partly due to the South, but head is a slang, in I think British slang for a toilet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think I googled that. Whenever I see people, I always ask, why did someone name their bar this?
Right.
It
I am
fascinates
sure it came from. I've asked that somewhere and just never got the answer.
Wow.
But it was. But the the numbers opened, because the other wonderful bar on Cheshire Bridge, which was the Magic Garden,
Now, I've heard several people mention that. Talk about that.
Magic
I've actually
Garden.
seen a membership card from the Magic
Oh, really?
Garden.
Magic Garden. Lisa and I would go over there, and several folks, she'd go perform over there sometimes and do spots and
And let people know where it was.
The Magic Garden was on Cheshire Bridge. It's down near the Colonnade, across the street from the Colonnade. Yeah, kind of, and close. And another large bar.
And now I think it's
It is a strip club.
Strip bar.
Huge strip club.
There used to be a helicopter outside.
That's the one. It has these towers that are painted like red and yellow and blue, so hello, you can't miss me. And it sits back. It was incredible for the folks that would be there. It did like the Gumhead with these, the star, big names, popular.
Was it mainly drag?
It was mainly drag, but you had the guys also. R.C. Cola performed there. He was a wonderful male entertainer, and sang live.
I've never heard of him.
He was hot, he was tall, the whole bit, and he sang live and had an awesome voice. He actually wound up he did a couple of shows. I mean, he wound up being in New York, and being cast in some musicals.
How long was the Magic Garden around?
The Magic Garden, I could probably tell you from one of my guide magazines, because it became numbers.
Because my sense is it wasn't around like as long as Sweet Gum had.
It wasn't.
It wasn't as long. Can you describe how it was inside?
It was beautiful. It was a lot of rooms. You had different rooms. You had a little room in here where you had a little cabaret thing. The main room was a disco. It was disco. And they had big disco, all that. Go out on the side, and they had this place where you could go, but it had the big fencing, so and that was
But outside.
Outside, and for cigarettes or whatever. But then the disco was the main room, and the mirror ball thing, and all of that. And then you had the little cabaret room over here where.
And was this sort of high class and clean?
It was clean and nice and pretty. Had a lot of incredible wood floor dance room thing, and then the disco thing up here, the booth. With the glass case in it. And that's where, and in one of my books, they did a memorial to Angelo Solar. And he was the DJ there. And he was internationally ranked as a DJ. He performed in Puerto Rico, which I think is where he was from. No, he was in Barcelona. He throughout Europe, lived here. I did 2 pieces with him, where I chatted with him about what's the music thing, what's going on, whatever, for my Under the Lights piece.
You mentioned it in passing, and I don't want to spend tons of time, and you may not be comfortable talking about it, but I'm just curious if you can say any more about this Bar Wars phenomenon that was going on, and the competition or animosity between certain bars, and what drove it, and how sort of aware were people of it in the community?
I don't think the people in the community were aware of it at all, because none of my friends knew what was going on. Llewellyn. Is it Bobby Llewellyn? Anyway, they owned the locker room, and the Llewellyns, and it was him and his sister, and they were sentenced and went to prison for the bombing of the After Dark. And there was this thing between them and Numbers. I guess I can say this. I will never, ever, as long as I live, forget going into Numbers to pick up from the manager, Julian, his ad sketch, because back then we didn't have files, it was paste up, so he gave me this little thing like this in a folder, and his check. And I was doing it for Bob, they weren't my client. And I remember going in, and there was him and a couple of these other guys, and I knew they were all at different bars. They didn't all work there. And sitting on the desk were 2 pistols. And I just got it and whatever, and then the guy that kind of walked me in and whatever walked me back out, and I was like, wow, I see lunch is a little tense. And he just kind of laughed and went, that's what they have to do to communicate with each other. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to leave. And you all.
Did this just involve certain, like a few bars, or was it, so most of the bars weren't involved in this quote-unquote war?
Most of the bars, Dennis was wonderful about it, at the bar on Peachtree, whenever another bar had like Plum Nelly's would have an event, he and some of his staff folks would go over there and buy beer and whatever or whatever.
And where was the bar on Peachtree? Talk about that.
The bar on Peachtree is across from Illusions. So the bar on Peachtree and Weekends Warehouse were right beside each other. So go back to back at between 10th and 13th on Peachtree Street.
They would be on the west side.
They were on the west side. Coca-Cola's behind you.
Gotcha.
This is on the side with Piedmont Park that way.
Right.
And and then there was Weekends Warehouse, which was was a big theater that became a bar, and then the bar on Peachtree, and then Weekends Warehouse is where RuPaul danced.
Right.
He danced.
Right. So was the bar in Peachtree mainly a place to go have a drink, or was it a dance club too?
No, it was not a dance club at all. If you went in, their big thing was it was a cocktail bar, whatever, and in the kitchen they had the fabulous Miss Renee Ross, who was actually from Asheville, North Carolina, but I knew her here, and she also performed. We have a mugshot, and she cooked, and she worked at Crazy Ray's for a minute. Crazy Ray's was down north in the section of Ansley Mall that's on the other side of the creek. So you have Ansley Mall down at Monroe and Piedmont,
Right.
and then north of that was a section where you had Crazy Ray's, and today it's where Burkhart's used to be,
Right.
and
Oscars.
Oscars and Trips.
Right.
Well, my good buddy, is Ziggy Stardust is bartending today. Ziggy's a longtime chum. So,
So would people then go? The bar in Peachtree was mainly a place to go eat, and it was mainly a gay restaurant.
It was a gay bar and restaurant, and they did that, and they would do art from several of artists. Mark Vance was a big popular Atlanta abstract artist, and as a matter of fact, one of my birthday presents came off from him via the walls in Bar and Peachtree. And he, but you would go in, and Dennis was big at recruiting personalities to be behind the bar. Richard, that Dama Queen, was funny, wonderful, exciting. He was just all of it. You weren't working behind the bar unless you had a personality. And you could sit at the bar.
Describe how it looked.
You went in and it was a shotgun. You came in and here's the bar with the stools, and this is all glass windows off Peachtree Street. And then here are tables against the wall with an aisle in the middle and some tables in the middle. And then you go straight down the hall, kitchen's over here, bathroom, straight out onto a wooden deck that goes all the way back to, what is that? Well, Vickery's what? Crescent Street. And it's privacy fenced in, and you got a door that lets you out. And then there's the back of Weekends Warehouse is next door, and so there's a parking scenario, and
So you said glass windows. So it was very much no one's embarrassed to be seen in this gay restaurant.
you could see it. I worked at the Academy Theater, and we'd go there for lunch.
How long was Bar and Peachtree around roughly? Was it there before you arrived in Atlanta?
No, it was. It opened while I was here. When I came here, it was not here, and I know that because just recently reading where they had the opening, because he was the cover of the Pulse magazine,
Oh, wow.
and this Pulse magazine came out in like '83, so they about '83, '84.
Just a couple more things, and we can wrap up for today. I'm just curious, given your experience and a lot of your business connections were along Cheshire Bridge, and you know so much about that. What are your current thoughts about sort of this whole thing going on now in Atlanta, where there's certain people wanting to quote unquote clean up Cheshire Bridge, and with all the sort of high-end residential coming and bars being closed? Just talk to me about how that whole process is affecting you.
Well, my thoughts with it are a little bit go beyond the what it was as the gay bar thing, because I learned the story of Cheshire Bridge. Cheshire Bridge was created back in the 30s as a place for Mr. Buckhead to go and play while Betty stayed at home, and don't bring that trash here. That's why some of the most fabulous restaurants like Nino's and Alfredo's, if you recall, if you lived here long enough, you know that Nino's has been there
Right.
since, before World War II. And that's what they were created for, and that's why also there were all the titty bars and the whatever else and whatever, and the gay clubs just kind of came in, because, I remembered asking the question, I forget to whom, so when did the gay thing come in? So the gay bars were there before, they just didn't have a lace, because sometimes Mr. Buckhead might have other needs than going to pick up the trash or whatever. That trash could be male or female. And I didn't get that. And so then in my piece that I did with Chuck Kane, he mentioned that one of the first gay bars here in the 1950s was on Cheshire Bridge. The TikTok was on Cheshire Bridge. And it was created just as all those other female, the titty bars were there. It was the same thing. So Cheshire Bridge, it was called the Great White Way. I never got the expression of the reasoning for that. But Cheshire Bridge's whole thing was it was to entertain, and it was to be this entertainment, even with a thing I read in an article, in a newspaper thing, way back in the 90s, about the paying off the city money given to the officers and whatever, to leave Cheshire Bridge alone. To cover your point, I think it's a sad thing, because that's a part of this city's culture that, and I do not have a positive reaction to, money grabbing, overdoing culture, pushing things around, just short of the fact of our contributions to gentrification, so forth and so on. I do not have a positive attitude towards it. I think it's absolutely despicable.
Right. So the TikTok Club, did in your discussions with other people, did you learn of any other early gay bars along there? Do you remember names, or can you talk about them?
Yeah, because Chuck was just incredible. And
do you know where the TikTok was, first of all, roughly, along Cheshire Bridge?
All I know is close to the bridge, so I'm getting the feeling that
near the Heretics.
Yeah, other side of the bridge,
like
where the Atlanta Water Garden is.
And Taqueria del Sol.
Taqueria del Sol. I think right there is what I get. Because the other thing is that in my mind, Poster Hut.
Mm-hmm.
It's where Poster Hut was.
Right.
Which is there.
Yeah.
Right next. That's the same thing.
At the stoplight where that road that goes off into Lennox.
Right at the bridge. Mm-hmm. So so there was that. So
did he describe the TikTok, like what it looked like, or was it a place?
It was
a drink?
Well, yeah. One of the things he told me, first of all, that until about the 60s, there weren't any gay bars. This was a bar that had gay and straight people mixed together. It was just that the gay folks were there. And they served predominantly beer. And then
was it classy?
He said it was very nice, very, very nice. You had tablecloths, very nice. You had food, but it was very, as I said, it was really just a place to sit and music. And
so it was mixed, but people felt comfortable being there with
they
it.
did. And I learned a lot from once again revisiting all this stuff, because I wrote this piece, and it was to be the history of Atlanta gay bars. So I did all these interviews with folks, Chuck and Charlie Brown and Satanville and whatever, and then Guide Magazine didn't have room for it, so I held on to it. And when I went through this trunk of stuff that I've had for 40 years, I found these 25 legal pad pages handwritten, which of course I shared with my good friend Mona.
Good.
But
thank God for your saving that.
Well, yeah, the pack rat lives. But the plantation, and then Chuck Kane opened in 1950, the year before me, 53. He opened Chuck's Rathskeller, Rathske, you know it. He opened that. It lasted a very long time.
And eventually it moved over to the shopping center at Monroe and 10th. I remember hearing people going there in the early 70s.
Right, well that plaza is where the TVs, with the theater. Yeah, theater. It actually was kind of in the area of where the building was, where there was a Winn-Dixie and Hoedowns was it was in that spot. The other bar that was there that went from being a mixy bar into being really a gay bar was the Plantation.
Where was that, roughly?
He didn't give me that.
Just on Cheshire Bridge.
He said it wasn't. It was in Piedmont. It was in town. It was over here. It was. He didn't. I don't have that.
But in all of these cases, from your talking to him, your sense was this was places people would go and sit and have a drink. It wasn't necessarily dancing, because it was still illegal for people of the same sex to dance.
Right. Yeah. I just got the gist that they were just drinking and hanging out. And the Plantation And then there was a bar that then who did the drag thing? So then the first drag queens to perform did perform at the plantation. And it was Neely Demand, and I found a picture of her, and Diamond Lil. And they performed together, and then there they had, this was where the guys, you could dance together. The story that was so crazy about the drag queens is that they had to have a male article of clothing on, so even though they're in a dress, your underwear, everything else has to be boy.
Right.
And then, right about then is also when they started doing liquor.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was, once again, crazy. It had to be a shot with ice cubes. Could not be mixed.
That's interesting.
Just, you know.
Let's see. I have three other things and we'll wrap up. And we can go into more of this in part two. I'm just curious, in these first few years when you guys first arrived here, what was John doing, your partner? Was he going to vet school then, or what was
No,
he doing?
he'd been trained a bit in Raleigh. And when he came here, he went to work, oh God, it was in Ainsley. And
At a veterinarian?
it was. And he walked the dogs and did the backup stuff and so forth and so on, and actually kind of got some sub-training. The people, pets are people too. So the pets are people too, it became them, but it wasn't called that. Pets are people too is very new, but it was the same.
It's in that shopping center
Correct.
with Oscars. And
you go down past Crazy Ray's and it dead ends, and there was a nursery, a plant nursery.
I remember that.
And they were right beside it.
I'm jumping around again. We're going to wrap up. We've been going for about 2.5 hours, and I think a good stopping point would be sort of the beginning of the 80s. But I just want to jump back. There are two other questions I have. First of all, you talked a lot about your time in college. I'm just curious, are you still in touch with any of your college friends?
Yeah, well, just two, and there was a bunch, but I lost them. There were 15 of us here from North Carolina, and I and Paul are the only two.
So the person who helped originally pull you out, Danny is gone.
Danny passed away. Danny passed away in my apartment because he got so sick that he just couldn't. He got real delusional. He wouldn't even know where he was. There was a cab driver, and if it hadn't been for the fact that the cab driver had given him a ride before, to bring him in. So we lived over at 4th and Charles Island, across near that Grace Church that I think they just tore down. And the cab driver comes up and goes, "I got your big redhead buddy," and I went, "Okay, we'll bring it. What's going on?" And I went out there, and he didn't even know where he was. So he came in, and then John said, "He goes nowhere." He says, "We'll stay." And so then John said, "Give me your keys." And so he got his keys, and he went over and packed up some of his stuff, and I went, "Sit down." And that was when we had the big soup at the counter joke, and I sat there and explained to him that you're staying here, and I'm going to take care of you and love you.
How long did he stay with you?
He stayed with us for 5 months.
And he'd been down here before you guys moved? He moved after?
He moved after I moved here, and there he comes, and then here comes Stan, who we call Sybil, and Randall, who we call Lou, and they formed Sybil Lou Productions, and they all came down here.
Well, we'll definitely pick up on that next time.
Sure.
But I was just curious, the person who brought you out, so
Sure.
he wound up passing away in your
Yeah, he did, and I was cleaning house, and I went in to wake him up to give him something to eat, and
What year would that have been?
it was, I will never forget it. It was 1984, and it was May 7th,
Oh, wow.
next Tuesday.
Wow.
But it just,
Okay.
It's a lot.
That'll be a big part of our conversation next time.
Sure.
The last thing, totally sort of unrelated to that, is Do you miss teaching?
Mm-hmm. I miss the opportunity to be in a classroom with folks who want to learn it, can engage conversation. Brain stimulation, networking, is the thing that you want if you're going to teach. If you want to teach and have people also in the room coming back, asking you things to where you're developing something and you're sharing what you know, the whole thing, once again, planting the seed.
Right.
I think my whole purpose on this rock has to do with planting the seed, and not all of them the same kind of seed.
I think that's a great place to pause. For people listening, we are going to end the first session. As I said, we've been going about 2.5 hours, and I think we are to the point in Gregg's life where he's in Atlanta, and that we're right at the cusp of the 80s starting, and I think that's probably a good place to make a break, and then we can pick up next time. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you
We
so much.
appreciate
This has
it.
been wonderful.
We appreciate
Really
it.
wonderful. Thank you.